All right, good evening. The time is now 6:02 p.m. here at the Desoto ISD Administration Building. Sorry for the 2-minute delay. We had some technical difficulties, but we are ready to begin the meeting. Item 1A calls for a welcome. I do want to welcome all of those with us tonight. It also calls for our invocation, pledges, our district mission statement, which will be read into our hearing tonight by Trustee Clark, our emergency statement, as well as to establish a quorum. Let's go ahead and stand for a word of prayer. Lord, we love you. We thank you. We are just appreciative of your grace, your mercy, which abounds in our lives to allow us to be in this place at this time to conduct the business of DeSoto ISD. We come asking a special prayer for those who have recently been struck by weather event in the southeast of the United States. Father, be with those families, the loss of life there, help them to rebuild. Also, Father, we come obviously asking special prayers for us as a community, as a district, as we strive to fit within your will and do what's in the best interest of students and our community members right here in DeSoto, Texas. We love you and we thank you for our time together. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
DeSoto ISD will prepare each student academically and socially to be a problem solver and productive citizen for a 21st century global society.
Thank you, Trustee Clark. I'm going to read at this time our emergency statement, which reads as follows. DeSoto ISD takes the safety of our students, employees, and guests very seriously, including those with us tonight. In the emergency situation such as a fire, please exit the building using one of the marked exits unless otherwise directed, and then in the event of inclement weather such as a tornado, we'll ask all guests to move quickly into the interior of the building, away from all doors and windows. Our emergency operations administrator will monitor conditions throughout the meeting and advise of any potential hazards or concerns, as well as coordinate with local emergency responders regarding when the situation has passed. Board, the last item under 1A is to establish a quorum. We do have a quorum with all 7 board members present, and so we are ready to move on in our agenda. Item 2 is a public hearing on 2017-2018 DeSoto ISD Annual Report, including TAPER, a Texas Academic Performance Report. Dr. Weaver.
Thank you, President Sherman. Calling Jade Miller and Kathy Farrell to the podium.
Good evening, Dr. Weaver, President Sherman, and members of the board. We're here today to present to you the 2017-18 annual report in accordance with Texas Education Code 39.306. As part of this comprehensive report, we do cover the Texas Academic Performance Report, in addition to 5 other components, including the PEAMS Financial Standard Report, the 2017-18 District Accreditation Report, Campus Performance Objectives, the reports on violence and criminal incidents on campus, and finally, the Student Performance in Post-Secondary Institutions Report. And we've actually added a 7th component, which is the 2017-18 TAPAR Glossary. So without further ado, I would like to call up to the lectern Ms. Kathy Farrell, Executive Director, Future Readiness and Accountability.
Thank you, Mr. Miller, Mr. President, Dr. Weaver, Board. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you this evening. Without further ado, I just want to remind you about the annual report. The first piece that's included in that list of things to cover for the annual report is the Texas Academic Performance Report, and we call it the TAPAR. So I want to highlight some things that are new, but reminder that this TAPAR data is pulled from PEAMS and from the student assessment data. What's interesting about the TAPAR for this year is previously the TAPAR, you've only seen it in paper form, but actually the link is there now. There is actually an interactive link that has gone live. TEA would really like for this not to be a autopsy type of report, but a report that is interactive, and they have updated throughout the year. I know that they've already updated it at least once since it's been online. So I've listed the link there for you as well so that you can use that throughout the year. But you do have in your packet a paper taper, as we're going to call it, for that purpose. So that's new this year. Did it go too far? Let's see. I think I got it the other way. Yeah, see if you can get it to go back. I'm sorry. It's a little bit different than the one I used. Can you go back to slide 2? Sorry. Yeah, having a little difficulty. So while he's getting me back to the one that starts off with the cover page, I'll just go and continue so that we can move forward because you have it as well. So under the first tab, which is the TAPR, if you'll notice something that's new with that is actually the letter grade for the district. Just to recall, this is our first year under the 3-domain system. Previously with this accountability, we've had the 4 indexes. So with the new rating system, thank you. It's the next one. Am I going the right way now? There we go. So with the new rating system, this is the first year that districts have received a letter grade. So for the first time this year, all districts received a letter grade, and DeSoto ISD received a D. Campuses did not receive letter grades. They will receive one next year during the 2019-20 in August. So for campuses, they could either meet standard or have improvement required. Also new is this, well, on the cover page, I should say, not new, is the special education determination status, and the district is the only one that receives that. DeSoto ISD did receive a needs intervention, and as you see before you, those are the different labels that could be earned. Also new this year is the ASVAB, or the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery. That is only for the district. We give the ASVAB, and that's the only requirement. So since we give that and we have that available for our students as one of the CCMR components, we did meet that requirement. Distinctions are the next thing that come up with the TAPR report. The district is eligible for one distinction, and that's post-secondary readiness. DeSoto did not receive that. However, if you go on to the campus designations, campuses are eligible for up to 7 distinctions, and DeSoto ISD is very pleased that our campuses combined had a number of 12 distinctions overall. As you can see before you, there is a list of the campuses that had distinctions and what those distinctions were, and we're excited that the campuses, some of those campuses had 2 distinctions as well. Also new this year, we've been talking about it as a group for a while, but it came to fruition this year. Previously, under the index system, the only performance level that counted for accountability was the MEETs, or excuse me, the Met Standard, not the MEETs. The MEETs and the Masters was not included. It was on the TAPR, but it wasn't included in your accountability. So this year, it's included for all your accountability, and it's in TAPR. And you'll see that on those pages as well. You have the approaches level, the MEETs, and the Masters, and it's reported for each assessment, all grades, all subject, and all grades by subject. I get asked a lot, what data points are they looking to create the TAPR as well as our accountability status? And what they're looking at is the summer. So this would be summer of EOCs of 2016, December of 2016, excuse me, let me get for the right year. Summer 2017, December 2017, and EOC 2018. Had to catch up with myself. So those, the spring is always the current year. The other 2 are from the previous year, but that's the accountability year and the TAPR year. So let's just dive into the TAPR and look at how each of the grade levels did by reading and math. That's how this is going to be divided out. And as you first look at this slide and the ones to follow, the first part on your left is going to be 3rd grade reading. And as you look at 3rd grade reading, for those of you that are sitting in the back or it's hard to see, the green, which is going to be on the bottom, is going to be the district percentage. The blue, or the one in the middle, is going to be the region. And then the state is the one that's going to be the yellow, which is going to be on top. So this graph, what it depicts is just the state, the region, and DeSoto. So DeSoto compared to the region and the state. So as you can see for reading, where we were on that, the one on the right, what that does is the first line itself shows you for 3rd grade reading, how did DeSoto ISD do just in increasing or with that standard from 17 to 18. So for DeSoto grade 3, we increased our approaches level. As you can see, it was a 64. The year before, it was a 63. So we went up. And then the others show how we did in the MEETs and the Masters, and we climbed a little bit there. The second line, which says percent change of the state versus DeSoto ISD, this is looking at it in a little bit different way. Are we closing the gap between where DeSoto ISD is and where the state has consistently performed. So this is looking at that gap. So we compared the state 16-17 to the district 16-17, the state 17-18 to the district 17-18, and then asked about that gap. Is it getting larger, or are we still having a little bit of separation there? So as you look at the numbers going across on this one, that's in relationship to the gap. So even though we had an increase in approaches, and that's an up arrow that's green, we moved a little farther away from the state, as you can see in that area. So that's how these slides will be depicted. Let's look at fourth grade reading. This is exciting. If you look at fourth grade reading, you can see on the top they had an increased academic performance and approaches meets and masters in all three levels. And then if you look at the percent change of the state versus DeSoto ISD, we're closing the gap. We improved on where we were versus the state average as well on all three levels when you look at the percent change. Fourth grade writing, again, you can see the district average there. We're close, but even then approaches, we went down by 2%. What's exciting is we went up in the meets and the masters area. The percent change, when you look at the gap, it stayed the same in approaches. We went down in one area and up in masters, and that's exciting in masters to go up 20%. Fifth grade reading, again, across the board, you can see from fifth grade from 18 to fifth grade 17, we increased at all three levels, and the exciting is we also had an increase of where we were with the gap compared to the state. And if you look at this one, I know it's a little hard to see, but we're sitting at 79% at approaches, and you can see the state's at 84, so we're only 5 away, so we made some great gains. Sixth grade reading, as you can see in sixth grade reading, we have some work to do there. Seventh grade reading, you can see we went up not only in approaches, but we also, even though we went down in the meets and masters, we still improved over that gap of where we were with the state, and by how much. And as you can see, again, seventh grade, we're sitting at 69% there, and the state's at 74%. So we're closing that gap. Seventh grade writing, we went up compared to seventh grade in 2017 at all three levels, and we increased our level as compared to the state, closing that gap. Eighth grade reading, as you can see, we went up in approaches and masters, and then we closed a little bit of the gap in approaches, and as you can see, we're almost there. I think we're at 84% if my glasses are right, and the state's sitting at 86%. English 1. English 1, as you know, for the state, not just the district, is a concern, but we certainly can improve, and we're excited that we went up in approaches. We had the same level at masters, but what's very exciting is we closed a little bit of that gap in masters as well. It was up 17% as relations to where we were with the state, closing that gap. English 2, we went up in approaches and meets, and then you can see our percent change versus the state versus DeSoto. Now let's look at math. Third grade math. We have some concerns there that I know that we're working on and addressing with our curriculum people. Fourth grade math, we went up in all three areas as compared to last year, and then if you look at the percent change to the state versus DeSoto, we closed that gap by having our getting closer to that gap as well. Fifth grade math, again, we went up in all three areas compared to fifth grade the previous year, and 41% in closing that gap in approaches. And as you can see, the district is sitting at 81%, and the state is at 91% in approaches. Sixth grade math, where we're up in approaches, and then we closed a little bit of the gap. Seventh grade math, that's exciting. We not only went up from seventh grade the previous year, but we also went up in the percentage change gap. Eighth grade math as well, up 30% when you look at the change gap, and we're at 72% for the district, where the state is sitting at 86%. But we went up as well in meets and masters from the prior year. Algebra 1, We slipped a little bit in approaches, but went up in meets and masters. Biology, we went up in meets and masters. We have a little bit of work to do there with this gap with the state. U.S. history, we went up in approaches, 15% in meets and masters. And if you look at this one, we're sitting at 89%, and the state's 92%. So even though we slipped a little bit, we are so close to the state. We are there. I know our kids can do it. So we're going to switch gears just a little bit. That was the student achievement domain. That has the approaches, meets, and masters averaged in for that domain. If you'll remember, when we go to the new accountability system, the second domain is called school progress, and it's actually also the growth domain. And this is very exciting. For 4 years now, as I've stood before you when we talk about accountability, this has been the area that we have shined. We do a great job at DeSoto ISD of taking kids where they are and making sure that students have growth. And that's what just this chart depicts. If you'll notice, it starts with 4th grade, and then this chart goes up to 7th grade and 8th grade math. The reason 3rd grade is not on here is because it starts with 4th grade, goes through English 2 and Algebra 1 or the other two that you can do, but you have to have another star grade to have progress to even calculate that. So 3rd grade, since they have not tested, that would have been their first year testing, they wouldn't be on this map or on this chart. But as you can see, I wanted to point out, because this is always, well, we've done well, and we certainly have. If you go over to the 5th grade reading and 5th grade math, you can see that our progress number has outperformed the state and the region. And then if you go over again to 7th grade reading, again, we're above the state and the region for our progress score. Now this goes over to 8th grade reading and math, and as you can see, in 8th grade, our score has surpassed the state and the region. And then the other two EOCs that we have a progress domain for, English 2, because it goes back to English 1. We are very close. We're within 5. Algebra 1, it goes back to their 8th grade math. And you can see how we have done compared to the state and the region there. So that is our school progress domain. So if you go on now, the second piece that needs to be included in the annual report is the PEIMS Financial Standards Report. I know that Ms. Cabrera has brought that to you in the past. I'm just going to review what's in it, and it is in your tab 2 as well, but I've also have the links there. So for the district, those are the items that are listed, and then there's the link for you or the public to have access to. And then on the right is the campus and the link for those campus financial data. The third component that we're required to have in the annual report is the district accreditation status. Each year, TEA assigns one of 4 accreditation status for the district, and those 4 listed are what's available. Our accreditation status for the 17-18 was accredited. Campus performance objectives, the campus improvement plan, and the district improvement plan. Each year, we're required to make sure that those performance plans are measured and added to the district website. So I know that that is on your agenda today. And then once those are approved, those will be added to the website. And then you have in your packet where you will go to find those will be also added to the campuses. The link that you see in your packet is not active until after you have approved those. The fifth report that's required in the annual report is the report on violent or criminal incidents, and that's from TEC section 39.306, which requires each district to publish as part of its annual report a report on the violent criminal incidents at each campus in the district. It lists what the report must include, and then you have a copy of that in your binder as well, and it's on purple. And you can see by campus each of those. It will be available for review at the central office and at campus office. The sixth thing is the student performance in post-secondary institutions. This actually comes from this data is compiled by the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. And it's actually a lagging indicator as well. So what you have in front of you, it will show you from the 2016 graduates, and what it shows you is for the 2017 when they enrolled in school, and I'm going to flip over there to that, when they actually enrolled into a 2-year or 4-year college, how did they do GPA-wise? And this is broken down by the high school and by wings. So again, this is from the graduating class of 2016, and how did they perform their first year of college in 2017? Lastly, for your reference, we provided the TAPAR glossary. And the district's TAPAR will be posted not only on our website within 2 weeks after this approval of this meeting, but paper copies will also be in the lobby here. They'll be in the lobby of each campus, and we do provide that for the library and for the chamber as well. Questions for me?
Thank you, Ms. Farrell, Mr. Miller, Dr. Weaver. Board, this is a report. I know that we've had this information, and we've had several town halls around it the same night that we approved Dr. Weaver, as a matter of fact, to start here in the district. But this will be live on the website for the community to receive and review. Are there any questions at this time? Trustee Fleming.
Going back to the annual report before your tab in your presentation, one of the things you spoke about. So walk me through this. This is what I'm trying to understand, because we can say we're closing the gap, but I don't know if it's closing the gap if we're doing this for, are we saying closing the gap based off of what we were really doing as it related to the state, or are we saying closing the gaps for what our students are doing?
That's awesome. And I'm going to go back and give you an example because it's the one I can remember right off the top of my head.
Okay.
When you, I'm sorry, keep going.
Oh, no, that's right. 3rd grade and 4th grade reading. That's why I was going to ask you to stay in that area. Okay.
So if you look at this one, approaches, we were at a 64%, but the year before we were at a 63%. So when you look at the top, that's where you went up by the 1%. But if you look at the percent change, the state versus DeSoto, there was, in 2016-17, we were 10 points, or 10 percentage points away from the state. In 2017-18, that rose to 13%. So the gap between where we were and the state, the rate is 3, but when you multiply that out to a percentage, we actually dropped 30% as where we were in the state, because the difference between the 10% and the 13% is 30%. Does that help?
You said the difference between the 10% and the 13%?
Mm-hmm. We were originally in 2016-17, 10% away from the state. In 2017-18, that moved to 13%. That's correct. So that equates out to, once you do the percent of change, to 30% drop. Mm-hmm. The gap rose that much.
Okay. So in that sense, every time we see, basically for layman's terms, if they see red, it's the further away, so the gap is getting bigger.
Exactly. We've gotten further away. Where you see green, we've reduced that gap and we've gotten closer by that much. Yes, ma'am. Great question.
Okay. So for many of we've gone away. If it's equal to, that means we
stayed the same.
The state stayed the same.
Mm-hmm.
So my next question to follow that would be then, did the accountability stay the same for 16-17 to 17-18?
No. If you'll recall, in 2016-17 was the last year for the 4 indexes. And it's very different, because the only thing you had to have there was you had a score for each index that you just had to meet that score. And you either met that score or you didn't. And the only thing that was looked at there was the what we call the approaches standard now, but it was called the MET standard, MET standards. I wasn't even called METs. So it was just the lowest of levels. And as we've talked about throughout, is that this was the first year that we had the approaches, METs, and the masters, which is the METs and the masters is key. They all now carry the same weight, and it's divided by 3 for your student achievement score. Whereas in the old system, that wasn't the case. It was just the first MET standard score. Did that answer that question?
It did, because we're comparing. So at some point.
So what's great there is we have closed the gap, and that's even with, and we've showed you across all 3 levels, because in the old system, they didn't look at METs and masters, is what I'm trying to allude to.
Right, it was a phase in, and if they were level 1, level 2, or level 3 at the recommended.
And we used to call, what was it, commended performance and all that. I know that's a little older, but yes.
Okay.
Great question.
So with looking at where we're going, because see, and it gives the illusion, I'm glad, that's why I'm really asking these questions, because it gives the illusion as if we in some capacities we are, but in the overall capacity of accountability and overall capacity of what it will take in order for our schools to receive a grade letter of B or above. I need you to go back through it one more time, because you said just kind of walk everyone through the third grade reading. What does that mean in the new accountability age?
Okay, so I'm just going to do just a quick accountability update, just so we're all kind of on the same page, and I don't mind providing an example for you at a later date as well. When we went for the 4 indexes, you could have index 1 or index 2, whichever was higher, and then you had to have 3 and 4 for your accountability. This year for the 17-18, we only have 3 domains, and so in that you have the TEA. The great thing about the new system is they're looking for your strengths. So they're looking at student achievement. Was that your strength, or was school progress your strength? And whichever one was better, TEA took that. Now here's where it gets convoluted. That piece in itself is 70% of the district and the school score. Okay, 30% is closing the gaps, which is domain 3. So a lot of people will say, because we're used to the old system, what do I have to have? Well, it's a kind of a mathematical game, but if you want to get just really on the board, what do I have to have? I would say a 70, because basically a 70 or above is going to be the D. But mathematically, could you have a higher grade in the 70% and a lower grade in the other one? Absolutely. But if you're going to ask me what do I have to have to make it an easy answer, I'm going to say 70. But what you have to realize is domain 1 and 2, so either student achievement at the approaches, meets, and master's level for elementary and middle school. Now for the high school, you have the CCMR component and the graduation component in there. So it's a little bit different, although that's still 70% once you look at that. As an overall score, and then domain 3 is 30% of that score. And then all of that comes together, and under each one of those there are percentages to what counts, but that comes together, and there are scaled scores that tells you if you get an A, B, C, or D.
Okay. Thank you for...
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. We all have to understand and learn together so we can help kids and make sure that we all know how we're being accounted for and accountability. Absolutely.
So as we're looking at this, and so I guess my next question, and I guess we'll carry over from the taper into back into the district improvement plan and the campus improvement plans, that one of those questions as it will come up, and you probably can prepare for it because I'll ask it again. What are we doing specifically to target the meets and masters area? Because approaches, we know, absolutely means nothing to us in this age of accountability. So where people are looking at this now, and you can see third grade reading, and it says 68%. 68 would look like, we have 68% of the students that are passing. We have 68% of the students that are just approaching the grade level that they're testing in. So that does not mean that they have exceeded that. So those are the things that when we're having the conversations, I just want to make sure that if they're addressed and outlined in our district improvement plan, as well as our campus improvement plan, as well as when we're having this conversation about taper, because what is presented, and I will say this, the other suggestion was we would probably have liked to see the change of the 16-17 to the 17-18 when you start talking about graphs and what is being compared to, just for if I was looking at it with bare eyes. So anyone would go in here, they would try to figure out where were we up from.
Right. And the interesting thing is when the state switches over to a new accountability system like this, to be able to even compare 17-18 to 16-17, they actually go back and they recalculate 16-17 based on the rules applied to 17-18. So if you go back to a different report, if it looks slightly different, that's why. Is they want you to be able to have apples to apples comparison in the taper report. So therefore, they go back to 16-17 and they use the same rules for 17-18 so they can put that in that report. I appreciate your question and your comment there, and that's one reason we really wanted to be transparent and give you as much information, because really in the past all we've looked at is the approaches, meets, and masters, and how did we do from one year to the next. And I was asked this year, well, can you show if we're making gains or not in that gap with the state? And so I appreciate the question very much. Did I answer all your questions?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Farrell, for your presentation. 2 questions. One, of the 5th and 8th grade tests, Are all three administrations included in these numbers, as well as are all of them counted toward accountability?
It's going to be the best of the three, more or less. That's what it is. It's the best of the three. So if your best was your first one, that's the one they're going to take, and of course you would not retest. I should say three. No, it's the best of two. The third one does not count. I'm sorry, my brain kicked in.
Thank you.
Thank you. I saw somebody looking at me, and I had to correct myself. It's the first administration and the second administration count. There is a third administration for SSI, because 5th and 8th is the SSI, SSI is the group that you have to pass reading and math to be promoted. But that administration, that June administration, is not in accountability, as you saw from the previous chart where it just says the spring, and then it's the EOCs for the summer and the fall. So my clarity on that.
So to that point, and I knew the answer to that question, I wanted you to say it.
Thank you.
My question is, what are we doing to make sure that kids are being successful on those first two administrations, if not the first administration? Ultimately we probably have more kids passing on the back end after that third administration. But what are we doing about that first initial test?
I think it's really about being intentional and looking at using some of our lead forward matrix and looking at benchmark assessment data and creating a foundation to where we can get ongoing data, not over testing, but be able to use the data that we have available to troubleshoot and target student specific needs. And so the best answer is focusing on student growth. So a question about meets and levels and what we're doing in particular to focus on meets and masters, is really to focus on every student maximizing their potential. So looking at what the student scored previously, if there's previous assessment data available, and then maximizing our instructional capital and resources to ensure that on the first administration we know specifically how students, what specific skills and knowledge students need to be successful, so we can make up for a year or more's growth by that first administration.
Okay, I'll go with that for right now. All right, second question. In regards to, and I heard you talk about distinctions. It's a bit troublesome to hear that we get a distinction for post-secondary readiness at the high school, and so maybe I'm not concerned about readiness. I'm more concerned about preparedness, because when I look at the post-secondary report, and I know it's a lagging report, but I've been looking at this report for the last 8 years, and it hasn't significantly changed. So I'm more concerned about preparedness and concerned if we're preparing kids to be successful in post-secondary options. So when we look at the data, and obviously this is only reflective of the students that are going to Texas schools. So of that number, of the 609 graduates that were reported for that year from the high school, and I'm not including wings into this number. So there were 331 students that enrolled in Texas schools. Of that number, 209 had a GPA after the first year of 2.5 or below. Included in that number, 150 had 2.0 and below. More likely than not, of those students who score that after the first year usually does not equate to them returning and being successful. You can take this even further and look at other parts of the taper, and you can see the success rate of students who were actually successful in graduating with their degree and the tenure in which it took them to be successful. That's a dreadful report to look at also. What I'm more concerned is, where are we preparing our kids with the rigor, the depth, the complexity that will prepare them to be successful? Again, I'm focusing on the word preparedness, because in this vein, readiness means nothing to me. Because if readiness is something that I should be worried about, then it wouldn't reflect this type of data. What are we doing? What is the plan to address this? I mean, because this is a repeat issue year after year after year after year. And I know you're going to tell me it's a lagging report and yada, 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 but I'm almost willing to guarantee this seat that I'm sitting in that next year's data is going to look something similar. I mean, and I've had experience in working with the young people who graduated and go to some of these colleges and universities, and they quite frankly talk about their deficiencies and their lack of preparedness, from English on down to the other subjects. And so I'm trying to see what is our plan for really addressing preparing kids for the next phases of their life. Now, obviously, there are resources available at these colleges and universities that they go to. But the other thing is we have to prepare them to be able to know how to take advantage of those resources too. So that's another missing piece. And if you could kind of respond to that, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think the first step is in the conversation we sort of been alluding to is we've been so intentional about approaches or meets, but that's just not acceptable. And even the commissioner with the realignment of the state accountability system acknowledges that the meet or master's level are the indicators that determine whether or not a student will be successful in post-secondary endeavors. And so shifting our narrative from approaches to now as an organization, we're looking at meets and preferably masters. So it's really changed the narrative on our expectations for our students, because for my own children, we expect meets and masters. And so that's going to be the expectation for all students in DeSoto ISD. The second thing is Dr. Weaver has really challenged us to really push our advanced academic programs. So we know that participation in the AP programs or other advanced academic programs are indicators and help students prepare for post-secondary success, not just readiness. So really doubling down on those programs. In addition to that, focusing on our Tier 1 foundation, focusing on meets and masters, not just getting to the phase in or the approaches level.
I'm glad you brought up a subject that I like to talk about, which is advanced academics and AP, which quite frankly, you've seen those numbers and you've seen that data. It is reflective of a lack of investment, a lack of intentional focus, and proper resourcing in that particular area. And so until we are laser focused in that regard, we will continue to get the numbers. When we look at, the state data, where the state number is 20% and the region's data is 25.3%, but our data is reflective of a 4.1. That's unacceptable. I mean, and that's all subjects across all tests. I'm really kind of like tired of like some of the rhetoric, and I'm really interested in us being very intentional about what we're going to do in that regard.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Trustee Hooper. Trustee Sargent.
Yes, thank you so much for today's taper report presentation. I have a couple of questions. Well, one, I want to offer this. We still got 12 distinctions. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
So we can add that to every conversation when I hear that DeSoto ISD received a D rating, that we got 12 distinctions? Okay, great. I just wanted to say that just in case nobody else wants to say that, because that is never a part of any conversation where the D is mentioned at all. And I think that is very discouraging to our children and our students when we constantly harp on something as if they didn't do something. So 12 distinctions, cool. So we can talk about that too. I did have a question. Considering the previous data, did we track any of the activities that got us to those percentages in the previous rating system from 16 to 17?
As far as student activities, campus interventions?
Yeah.
Not to my knowledge at that time, but I can find out if we have been keeping any sort of information about previous activities or interventions that led us to the data.
Because sometimes when I look at distinctions or I see that we've made gains or growth or percentages or even maintain the same, I wonder, do we even know how we got that at all? To replicate it, to do it again, to do it even better. So that is something that I would like to see tracking of those activities. The Trustee Hooper mentioned post-secondary readiness, and that's my baby. And so shameless plug, if there are any parents that have not submitted their FAFSA, being able to afford college also can determine and distract students from being successful their first, second, third, fourth, and fifth year, even their master's degree, post-graduation stuff. So finances are an important part of that. So FAFSA percentages would also be interesting to look at when we're looking at that, their GPAs and things like that. I'll be interested to see that. So again, shameless plug, make sure that your FAFSA is submitted by March 8th. Now, TSI MET, have we looked at that as it pertains to, because I know you mentioned that we were given the ASVAB, and that was just kind of like we automatically got it because we're offering the ASVAB, but have we done anything with TSI, since I know we are also a testing site for TSI? Has that also been looked at as far as those students that are taking the third, fourth, and fifth try, the summer, all the way, outside of that first attempt?
Absolutely. So we actually really had a conversation here recently about using the TSI as one of the alternative accountability instruments as well. So we've been having those conversations. As you know, we have our collegiate magnet program and our early college high school at the high school, and they are primarily the student group who utilize and take advantage of the TSI testing. But yes, studies have been shown all across the state of Texas that widening that and providing more access to students for the TSI testing is beneficial, and that's something we're willing to explore in the future.
Awesome. So I guess in addition to that, something to offer or even to think about, if we were to prepare students for the TSI, do we think that that could help them meet and master if they're prepared for the TSI? Because I know oftentimes when we talk about state examinations, we hear the phrase teaching to the test. Right. And so we're, zapping out creativity and things like that. But if we were to prepare students for the TSI as a form of measurement, knowing that whether they, passed or met the TSI, they would not be in developmental courses when they go to their first year institution of their choice, that could be something that we look into.
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. And then 12 distinctions. I just wanted to say that one more time, just in case we forgot. 12 distinctions.
Thank you.
12 distinctions.
Thank you, Trustee Sargent. Trustee Clark.
Thank you for the presentation tonight. My question is in regards to the SAT, ACT. What are we doing to improve our SAT and ACT scores? Because on the district level, we are way behind both the state and the region. So how can we improve those scores, and what are we going to do differently?
So I've actually been getting some weekly updates from our Director of Advanced Academics, who's actually been doing quite a few camps, really targeting. We spend a lot of time traditionally focused on star, end of course exams, but I was very pleased to see the exciting things that were happening with our students who were preparing for both the AP exams and the SAT exams as well. And as you know, this Wednesday we have our PSAT 10 administration at the high school, as well as our SAT school day. So hopefully utilizing that PSA 10 data and using even from the PSAT 8, 9 and on up, using that data to strategically identify the students who can benefit from additional interventions, not waiting until their 11th grade year or their 10th grade year to start providing those interventions, but starting earlier to provide, to intervene to ensure their success on SAT.
Thank you. My other question is, when we talk about the students taking the TSI in regards to cover their English 1 EOC or English 2 EOC, does that fall under the accountability of approaches, or does it fall under meets and then masters?
It's meets, and actually it's for the TSI. You can use the SAT, PSAT 10, PSAT 8, 9. All of those alternative assessments, there is a range from which the student can use those. Now, I'm going to say this year, it's a caveat. I think TEA, from all the discussions I've been listening to, this will probably be the last year it's at meets. After that, I think very much similar to how they have staggered the approaches, meets and master's level, I think they're going to do that for all alternative assessments. But currently, and I always say that currently, it's at the meets level, and it was as well last year. And we used a lot of the alternative assessments and gave kids the opportunity to use that for the meets level for them and for us.
Last question. Do you know how many students we have who did the Senate bill to be able to graduate last year, and how did that affect our accountability?
You're talking about House Bill 1822, where we have the GPC meetings. I don't have that data currently on me, but I certainly don't mind getting it and providing that to the board.
Please, thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Clark. Trustee Hooper and then Trustee Fleming.
So also in regards to the college readiness piece, so the SAT, ACT scores, what is our plans in terms of improving SAT, ACT scores in terms of where we're performing now in comparison to both the region as well as the state?
I will get back with you on the answer for that. I don't have an answer at this time for that, but I can get back with you on a plan, a succinct plan for that.
Trustee Hooper, can I provide a response to that? And this is also just a response to the number of questions that we've heard here today. And while there are some things that we can do in the interim, I do want to remind this team that we received a report in December talking about the state of where our academic, our teaching and learning shop is as a whole. And that report says that we have an opportunity to do some things differently, to build and to create. And that is not something that we want to do haphazardly or put Band-Aids on. But in order for get our children to truly be post-college ready, that starts in pre-K. That starts in first and second and third grade. That starts with having a viable and a truly rigorous curriculum. That starts with having genuine learning experiences where our kids can create and do. That also starts with how we utilize our summers and how we extend learning. That starts with us having a truly defined college plan that helps build their knowledge around college and the application process in elementary school, so that we're not wasting time trying to teach children the application process and families what FAFSA is when they're in high school. It starts with our schedule, our master schedule, and building in things, periods where they can get that knowledge. They can get during the day SAT, ACT preparation and support. Those are long-term, bigger solutions to some of these issues that we are building into our plan moving forward. So I can guarantee you every single year that we'll be progressing in the area of academic preparedness, and it won't be an approach that is just a Band-Aid.
So, thank you. I appreciate that response. I am talking about intentional and laser focus. Last year, we were presented that we purchased and paid for Princeton Review for 40 kids to be able to go through the entire course. And this is the same course that people on the other side of the Trinity pay good money for, but we purchased that, and we only had 13 students who participated in that. And part of that was our lack of being intentional in advertising and communicating with parents. And so whereas we could have provided young people with an opportunity to have improved scores so that it would have increased their collegiate options, but for whatever reason, that didn't happen. And so I want some type of assurance that we're going to be very intentional about, one, providing the options and services, but also communicating with parents and students the services that are available. And I haven't gotten a sense that we're doing that successfully at this point. So I just needed to put that piece out there, because I've gotten a number of questions about what services are we providing in terms of SAT, ACT prep, which makes me believe that that information is not being provided out in a meaningful way that connects with parents to the point that they're asking me questions about it.
Thank you.
And just to piggyback, we used to parade around here and say that it was a great thing that we had over 90% of our students taking the SAT test, but they still, when they took the test, they underperformed the counterparts in the state of Texas, so in Region 10. So please let that not be an indicator as to success for us. Moving forward, also, I want to put in my plug about class size. If you notice in the tape report, it says our class size at the state was 18.7, and that's just for kindergarten. For grade 6, it was 20.3. For English language ours is 16.7. So if we got these results with those, I'm still trying to figure out that the report that you showed us last year, how can you do this with 33 students in your classroom? So I'm just putting that out there because the tape report it shows, and it also shows that we have 910 special ed students, which the number could have increased even more because we still have students that are identified. When you put those students in the classroom and they are not serviced adequately, and they're not being followed up with, and you're not supporting them and the teacher in the classroom as to how to better serve those students in the general population setting as they should be, it creates an environment where, again, that student gets frustrated and therefore may begin to act out or may shut down, where other students see the student, or other students are trying to figure out why the teacher is spending so much time on that one student and they feel like they're being neglected. So again, I'm going back to, I need to see your plan of support and what support looks like, because we know these things affect what's happening in the classroom. Also, when we look at we have our professional staff. And so another thing when we're talking about our budgets, and I know, Dr. Weaver, you're looking at all this, but if we're going to have a public hearing about taper, then let's have a public hearing. We're looking at our professional support and our campus administration versus the teachers that we have, beginning year teachers. We have 76 beginning teachers, and we have 192 1 through 5 year experienced teachers. And then we have our teachers that are 11 to 20. So the thing about our teachers who have 11 to 20, when you begin to, so we assume they have the experience, they have the know-how, the gusto, they can get it done. But somehow at year 11, 20, when you start changing class sizes and you put 33 students in the classroom, I then have choices. And I have a choice to stay because I'm loyal, or I have a choice to stay because I need to go somewhere where my talents and I can be developed, and that actually will enhance what they do as a teacher. Most of the ones that we see 192 from year 1 to 5, if they are put in certain situations, we know they're going to do what? They're going to leave. And so therefore, when we have these conversations, I wanted to have this conversation in a public hearing so that I'm publicly heard, that this has to be another consideration before we just come through and try to strike down what's not working based off of money. So that's my spiel. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Fleming. Trustee Daniel.
I just want to make some observations from what I've been listening to. First of all, we've done the same thing over and over and over again, and it doesn't work. We have to change our methods. We have practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced test taking till we have bored the children to death. They don't want to take these tests. They don't particularly care whether they succeed at taking the test because they're so tired of practicing. We've taken the joy out of learning. We need to go back and make them want to learn, make them have fun learning, make them enjoy reading, enjoy the stories that they're reading. The third grade scores, if they are not on grade level at third grade, they are never going to be on grade level because they don't have the joy in learning right there. We have to have continuity in our curriculum, in the rigor of our curriculum. It needs to be a little bit difficult for everybody, just an inch above where they think they can be, so they can reach for it. We can't have it down here where it's so easy, they're bored. They don't want to do it. They have to be reaching all the time for something. So we have to have it lined up. You know, they're supposed to be introduced to it at this grade level. They're supposed to be reinforced at this grade level. They're supposed to master at this grade level. Then they're supposed to go on to something a little more difficult. We have to concentrate on that rather than let's practice taking this test. And we can't just concentrate on our advanced students. We have to concentrate on everybody. Everybody takes this test. We're all in this together. You know, so we can't just say, well, if we have more advanced students, we will do better. That's not necessarily so. If they're up there making 95s all the time, they can't slip down to 94 because they have lost ground. We have to concentrate on everybody going up. I think our expectations are not where they should be. We should be expecting students to enjoy school. We should be expecting them to want to learn, expecting them to be excited about going home and telling their parents what they did that day, not, oh no, there's another test practice. I have to be sure I eat the right breakfast. I have to be there on time. I have to have 2 pencils. I have to whatever. I need to enjoy school just a little bit so I can perform well.
Trustee Sargent.
Yes, I had a question. At the start of this year, how many retesters did we have for English?
English 1 or 2, is that the question? Mm-hmm. I don't have that at the top of my head, but I can find that for you.
Okay.
I know it, but I don't know it by heart. I'm sorry. We've looked at that, and I have a retest file, but I do not know it by heart.
Okay. And then another thing, in reference to the percentage, because I just got to thinking. So when we were looking at people's GPAs and test scores and the lagging index, how are our CMP, our early college, and IB students factored into that? Like if they're earning college credit, how are they, or like do they go into that percentage for post-secondary percentage for GPAs and things like that?
So I'm going to rephrase, and if I don't catch it all, you let me know.
Okay.
So our students like at ECA for the early college high school who are getting their dual credit, that's your question. If they leave here with that dual credit and we have coded them correctly in PEIMS and we've uploaded that to the state, that's where that data is being pulled from. So as long as we make sure that all our coding is correct, that's how they're being pulled. But yes, everybody is in that calculation that you see. And with the new CCMR component, we're having not only discussions at the district and campus level, but we're making sure that kids have met one of those CCMR indicators. And the interesting thing about CCMR is of those 8 indicators that are listed there, and it's not in your handout, but I can certainly get it for you. It's on the Lead Forward site for that. But there's 8 indicators that you can reach CCMR, TSI, AP, dual credit, all those. A student just has to meet 1 to be considered CCMR ready. Kathy Farrell may have met 8. No, maybe she met 3. We don't get additional points for that.
Okay.
That's great for Kathy Farrell, but the district receives 1 credit as long as the student received 1. So it's did they meet one of those components? Did that answer that question for you?
It did, kind of.
Okay, well, rephrase and let me try again.
Well, I just wanted to know, considering that those students were technically degree holders, like in this a lagging index, would they be counted
They will
for
count. They will count, but they're going to be behind. So as this came from, this was the 17-18, so you're looking at your 16.
And we had some associate's degrees.
We
in that
did,
year, too.
so all of that should be in there. I said
Okay.
they have to be coded correctly. So as a district, we are making sure that those systems and things are in place as well.
To make
Because
sure the coding
if
is
nothing else, this new accountability system, and it has done a lot of things. I agree that the meets and masters level are there, but it's also put a laser focus on your systems and processes and your coding.
Right.
Because
we
making
need
sure that all those students are coded correctly. You're absolutely correct.
Okay. And then you said something, and I lost my thought. I should have
I'm
wrote
sorry.
it down.
You think of it? I'm not going
Oh, yes. Okay, so we talked about lagging indicators and what we should expect or anticipate since it is a lagging index. Dallas County Promise started with DeSoto ISD. So since all they need is that 1, no matter what other categories they filter into, that will count towards that 40% of CCMR. Right?
And you'll have to refresh my memory from Dallas County Promise. I'm sorry, it's back there. Or do they earn that degree before they leave in
It just makes
June?
sure that they apply, that they have, all these other processes. They do a pledge, but I'm saying that was done last year.
I know we
before
do
the
that,
start.
but that's not one of the CCMR components. One of the
Okay.
CCMR components is, did they receive the dual credit while they were here? Did they
Okay.
receive an associate's degree? Did they receive a 3 or 4 or 3 on an AP or a 4 on an IB? If all of that happened before they walked out of our door, then yes, that gets counted. Or in some cases, actually, and I'm going to be corrected because I can hear the PEIMS people in my mind, is actually we have through the summer submission for that if we find out like in July that somebody met that, we can upload that and correct that. So,
Okay.
but they have to have left here basically, and we have to have counted that before August. that they attained that before they left. So just filling that out, and that's what I'm hearing, so correct me if I'm wrong, that would not apply. They would have to meet one of those indicators. They would have to leave here with that degree or that associate's.
Okay, thank you.
This data is data that we've looked at since it was finalized from the state over the summer. We have presented this out to the community. I know at a town hall in which we had the conversation, and we really left the data up on the screen for people to see it and for people to be confronted with where we are. And you, Dr. Weaver, and the team that you've built are new to DeSoto, but you were brought here with the intent for a very intentional purpose, and that is to move this district forward academically. We have bright spots. We have a lot of good things going for us, but there are also areas of opportunity that we need to be intentional about moving the progress measure forward. When I look at this data, I think sometimes we look at the third grade data and we just we dismiss it as it is what it is. This is where we are, good, bad, or indifferent. But the reality of the matter is that we in DeSoto and on this Beltline corridor, talking about Lancaster, Cedar Hill, and DeSoto, have the most people of color, specifically African Americans, residing in this small geographic area in the entire state. This was the conversation that we had with our legislators last week, is that we have the most people of color, specifically African Americans. We know that we have the most African Americans within DeSoto ISD of districts of 5,000 or more students by population. I'm sure that number is going to change based on the enrollment for this year. But the impact when you look at third grade reading levels is that the state of Texas builds a prison cell based on how many students pass their reading exam by the state assessment. And so as we look at our students walking our halls each and every day, we should really not be looking at them as just a score or a percentage or where they are in the state. There's literally someone in the state through a private prison, which if you look after elections, it's always interesting to see how their stock prices increase or decrease depending on who's in office. But they have literally told us the formula that they use to build new prisons, to see how many prison cells they need, is third grade reading. And so the sense of urgency that's coming from this board table, Dr. Weaver, the reason why you're here is because we see more than just data and numbers and statistics. We see our community's future. We know that if we want to remain a sustainable community that attracts businesses, that attracts people that want to live here, then we've got to perform. We know that they look for reasons to discount us. We know that they look for reasons to cast us against each other. We understand that. We also understand that our mobility rate is extremely high. In many cases, that mobility rate is not necessarily from people moving from Paducah, Kentucky to DeSoto, Texas, or from DeSoto to New York. It's people moving from Cedar Hill to DeSoto, from Duncanville to Lancaster, and we change kids each and every year. So we're very much interested to see what happens in Lancaster and Cedar Hill and Duncanville. And we want to see them be successful because they need us to be successful as well, because our third graders may very well be their fourth graders next year. And so the sense of urgency, Dr. Weaver, and understanding, we as board members understand this data. It's a lagging indicator. We know that the high school goes in, if I'm not mistaken, it's 60 or 70% of their score is already determined. Is that 70% or is it 60%? So we know that this year's data that comes out of the high school, 60% of it was determined by what happened last year.
The 60% of domain one, which is their 70% of their overall score. You're correct.
And so it's important for us to make sure that our staff has the resources to be successful, that our teachers have the tools that they need to be successful, that we don't have another year like we had last year or in the future in which we had significant gains. We received 12 distinctions. I believe that was up from 3 the previous year, 4 the previous year, and up to 12 in 1 year. And that's something to definitely be excited about. But what's underlying and what's in the data that we did not discuss today is that 4,000 of our students either did not grow and they showed no growth or lost a grade level. And that's And that's important, to make sure that we're reaching each and every child, that we don't look at a child who mastered the previous year and just assume that everything's going to be fine, that we're engaged actively in teaching and learning and moving students forward. And it's not our job as board members to tell you how to do that, but it's our job as board members to tell you that's what we expect. And that's what this community expects for us, and that's why we're here. And so I like the conversation that we've had at this table, that we've got to do things differently. We've got to change things up. It can't be the same old, same old. And we as a board, I think, have the intestinal fortitude to be able to stand tough when you make these decisions for the betterment of kids and moving this district forward, to say that we understand we're not where we want to be and we've got to do things differently. You put together a plan, you and your team, of how we can move from this D, we can move from just 12 distinctions to where 12 distinctions grows and multiplies, and this letter D improves drastically for our kids. Because once again, it's not just numbers. This is our students, this is our community, this is our region that's at stake. It's extremely important work, it's imperative, but we as a board brought you in for this reason, to move the needle. And so I know we're going to talk about district improvement plans, board. Once again, it's been said, we know that this is a lagging report. This is data we've articulated out. This is a conversation that we've had. The community should know that this will be posted online, as has already been mentioned, and the community can take a look at it, because I will say this as well. There's some in the community and some just in general, this is the way, the way life is right now. They call it clickbait in media world, because they just want to write a salacious headline to get you to click it, and they hope that you read through the whole article to get the context, but that's not always the case. That's why they now put how long it takes to read the article on it, right, before you even start. But it's important to know, yes, we received that as a D, but we've got some phenomenal campuses that are doing great things, receiving a number of distinctions and having tremendous success, that are neighborhood schools, that are not, some special elite mythical campus that you can't get to, right? It's Cocker Hill, it's Woodridge, it's East that has 100% passing rate for their Algebra 1 exam. It's those campuses, and I could name a number, that are doing some phenomenal things, and we want to make sure that we're communicating that, but also communicating the sense of urgency moving forward. Board, are there any additional questions or comments as it relates to this item? Trustee Gold.
Yes, thank you for this good report. Thank you for the information, because information is very important, because there's a lot of, fake news out there in our community. And so we love it when we have facts that we can share with the community. One of the things that hasn't been mentioned in this circle that I really think I need to address, because I keep hearing it from the community, hearing it from parents, is that we really need to do something about our discipline and our school pride and our, I don't know how to sum that up, but we need to make, somebody did say, we need to make it so that the kids, I think it was Miss Daniel, love to come to school, and they're proud of their school, and they want to succeed to make their school better. And we used to have that, and it seems like we've lacked that core element. And I don't think it's buying a program and teaching something. I think it's just getting each teacher every day to do something positive in that classroom so that the students feel like they are important and they are contributing. And I still hear that we have discipline issues, that somebody said this too, that one child, I think it was Miss Fleming, that one child in the classroom that can disrupt the whole atmosphere for the day. We need to have an alternative for that one child so that the other 32 children in there, or 27, or however many we're going to have in that classroom next year, they can learn so that that one child isn't keeping the other children from learning. We all understand that concept. Every child matters, and I'm not saying that child doesn't matter at all. I'm just saying that if anything is interrupting the learning process in that classroom, we need to help that teacher with that learning process for that child or those children that are not being successful. We don't want them to keep the other children in there from being successful also. So, and I know we've covered that basically, but I just really want to emphasize those points because I keep hearing that the teachers are struggling. They don't have the resources they need. They don't have the backup that they need. They don't have maybe the support from the parents. I'm not sure exactly, but and again, that's not our job. That's your job to figure out what they need. But we need to do more to support that teacher in that classroom. So
Yes, ma'am.
thank you.
Any additional comments, questions, board? Trustee Fleming.
One of the things I just want to make the comment, I know we're looking at the taper, and the taper is based off of third grade reading in 2017 for everyone listening. So that means the students now are in fifth grade. Those sixth graders that did not perform at all are now in the ninth grade. And so those are the questions that I will still bring up in the CIP, but I just wanted to make sure that I'm saying that right.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
She said that you were four this last year.
So they're in fourth grade now?
They're in fourth grade.
Okay. So
That's
17,
correct.
18.
The only thing that's lagging would be your graduation things. Everything else is as of the spring of last year.
So the dropout rates in the graduation, that's
lagging indicator, yes, ma'am.
For 2017.
But when you look at the STAR scores, those were spring of 2018.
Gotcha.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Trustee Fleming. Seeing and hearing no additional questions or comments, thank you, Mr. Miller. This brings us to, and Ms. Farrell and Dr. Weaver, this brings us to item 1.3, which is a public hearing and comments on the 2017-2018 annual report, which we just discussed. If you wish to speak on this item, you may simply step to the lectern, after which you will have 3 minutes to discuss this item. The time is now 7:13 p.m., and we will open the floor for public comment. I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am. This is the portion of our agenda, our item for public hearing. This affords our community the opportunity to address this item specifically. If you'd like to discuss it, you may step to the lectern, and you have 3 minutes for this portion of the meeting to discuss. The taper report that we just had a presentation on? Okay. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And once you begin, Ms. Williams, your time will start.
Anna Williams, 920 Plantation Drive, DeSoto, Texas. I want to, first of all, thank Dr. Weaver and Ms. Gabriel for the honesty. I think we have a long way to go. I'm buying in to your program. What Ms. Daniels said, a teacher of 40 years, and Ms. Gold, and not dismissing anyone else because I'm old, okay, or just not. I think that, and I was writing down, my teacher, Miss Annie Jones, was 78 years old when I was in the first grade. Well, we call it pre-primer. There were 3 classes in her room. And I thought about the 1 to 15. Miss Annie Jones had 1 to 60 in a segregated school. And I could read. You have to make school, and I know we're talking about money, cuts that we're going to have. That's okay to get us back to where we were. We have to give the new superintendent, of which I won't lie, I like a lot. Okay? I do. And I think in time, he will bring us in this community where we need to be. We can throw Velcro balls at any wall that we want because we've had them for the last 5 to 6 years, Velcro ball. T-STEAM, I-STEAM, that STEAM, this STEAM. We got to get back to core, reading, writing, arithmetic, and the computer. These kids can pass any test. I had no problem at Mary C. Womack in Longview passing the ACT, SAT, because our teachers made us learn, and we enjoyed learning. We knew the houses of representative. We knew English. If you said this or that, oh my God, you got sent to Mr. Cobbs, who was the AG, who would paddle you. I grew up in segregation. And when you talk about prison, that's not important to me, because every one of my grandchildren, it's not an option. They go to college. It's not an option when my children went to school. They go to college. And with Miss Daniels, I remember Tanya, she taught her, and a young man was interrupting, and she said, you might not want to learn, but we do. That was Miss Daniel. That was Miss Gold. I know the teachers, a lot of teachers. I'm sorry, am I up?
Thank you so much.
Okay, I can
Ms.
talk
Williams.
all night. Thanks.
Wow. Thank you, Ms. Williams. Once again, for public comment for this hearing item, you have 3 minutes.
Yes,
The
thank
time
you.
will start, Ms.
My
Sanders.
name is Tracy Sanders. I reside at 601 Heather Knoll Drive in DeSoto, Texas. I also, like Ms. Williams, want to thank Dr. Weaver and your diverse group of support. What you all are bringing, what we're hearing is positive, it's refreshing, and our kids need that. Learning does need to be fun. But we also have to look at the gatekeepers from which all this happened. You are responding to something that happened well before your time, and you're trying to reach out using many different branches to pull it all in together to make us whole again. The stronger support system, I think, is what we need here in DeSoto. So I know there's a lot said about the academics, but we've got to reach out to the parents to help those kids be successful in the classroom, because the responsibility rely on the parents as well. We've got to do more. We've got to come out. Our school board meetings, there are, probably a handful of parents here, but we need to do more to incorporate them with the academics and what's going on, making them a part of the process and like the calendars and stuff. I enjoy being on those committees, but I think we need to reach out more. And I think we need to be a little bit nice on the group that's here now, because they're trying. I know a lot of questions are really like targets and daggers at them, but they're really working hard, and I think they bring a lot of good to the table. I look at all y'all backgrounds to see what's going on and what you've done in the past. We need to also foster programs like Gear Up, because I was one of the parents who pulled my daughter out of school in 3rd grade because she didn't learn what she should have regarding math. And I realized that I was deficient. I did not know how to put together a teacher's a lesson plan, which was desperately needed for her success. So I had to retest her and bring her back in. But she's had some great teachers to pull her in and teach her, and she's learning and loving math again in the 10th grade. I'm glad to see that success. I'm glad that we have programs like Gear Up that I didn't know much about, but I've made a very great honest effort in being a part of everything that they did with DeSoto, and I followed, and I see how they're bringing in success with them, with the testing for SAT and PSAT. The school district need to embrace those, because that's a grant program that we're not having to pay back. I'm not sure, but I'm happy with the success that it brings. And then my daughter got to go to all the black colleges in Atlanta, and then she learned that she didn't want to go to college to be a cosmetologist. She wanted to learn to be an entrepreneur. But some program embraced her and allowed her to look into that and see what was the possibilities for her. So I think it's all doable, but we've got to include the parents a little bit more and give them more responsibility, and holding kids accountable for their disciplinary actions when they're not doing what they need to do. We need to have a solid plan to let them know that's not how you act in the classroom, and the teachers need to be supported as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Sanders. Once again, this is the public comment portion. There are 3 minutes for this point.
Thank you. My name is Cherie Andrews. I live at 1318 Turnbridge Drive in Glen Heights, Texas. I want to first say, concur what others have forestated. I want to appreciate Dr. Weaver and this entire school board team and staff and all of your supporting staff for what you're doing. My 2 daughters, I have one that is 4 years old at the Amber Terrace campus, as well as a 6-year-old in 1st grade at the Cockrell Hill campus. And a part of my purpose for being here tonight is to see of course, the focus and the plan for a better trajectory for the district. I'm one of those parents who is a parent who is considering, myself and my husband, of possibly transferring our daughters out of the district into private campuses. And so it's my desire, being here and being in the atmosphere, as well as doing what I can to help foster the positive projection of the district. From what I see tonight, I'm very optimistic about the direction of the district, and I would love to keep my children in the ISD, but at the same time, my purpose for being here is to see what forward movement we can have to have a better outcome for my 2 daughters who are just now embarking upon the district. So I want to appreciate all of the work that you all are doing, all of the questions, all of the in-depth work behind the scenes that it takes to help the district grow and to give greater hope and greater possibilities and a better outlook for parents such as myself and my husband. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Andrews. Anyone else wishing to speak? This is item 1.3, public hearing comments on the 2017-2018 annual taper report. Seeing no one else moving that way, the time is now 7:23 p.m. and we will close this portion of our meeting and this item specifically, item 1.3. Board, this brings us to item 3. Item 4, which is our action items. Under action item, we have 4A, consider approval of 2019-2020 academic calendar. This is an action item, and as such, board, we can entertain a motion and a second if there be any from anyone at this time.
Move to open discussion in regards to the 2019-2020 academic calendar.
Second.
I have a motion to open discussion. That motion was the motion made by Trustee Clark. The second was made by Trustee Fleming. Call the question. You may now cast your vote. All votes being tallied, that motion passes 7-0. Dr. Weaver.
Thank you, President Sherman. Call to the lectern, Chief of Staff, Sonia Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you, Dr. Weaver. President Sherman, Board of Trustees. We are bringing this item back for your consideration. Just a quick overview for our guests in the audience. We did unite a calendar development committee to propose options for the 2019-2020 academic calendar. That initial committee met in January 10th, and they yielded 6 options. We presented those 6 options to our academic team and human resources department, and they whittled it down to 3. And then we presented those 3 options for an online survey during the month of February. Last week, we presented a recommendation to the Board of Trustees, and they asked that we go back and reopen the survey, give more parents more opportunities to vote on a recommendation. And so we are going to share that information this evening. But it's an overview of the requirements. All of the academic calendars must yield at least 75,600 minutes. Teachers must work at least 187 days. All of our calendar options did observe most government and national holidays. We did propose a change in the school time, ensuring that we have equity with each campus attending school for 450 minutes, which is about 7.5 hours in the school day. Trustees, some of you raised questions and concerns regarding transportation and transportation's ability to meet the needs of this new schedule. Initially, when we met with transportation early this spring, they said it would not be a problem. However, we have reached back out to them just for verification and to guarantee. Thus far, they said they would prefer a 30-minute window, but they're willing to work with us, and so we do have plans to circle back with them this week. We're still waiting a final recommendation of how they can best accommodate the new school times. The proposed options do reflect a 6-week term. And additional notes, we heard feedback from our parents to ensure that our spring break was aligned with districts in our area. And the following districts on the screen are aligned and do share the same spring break: Arlington, Cedar Hill, Frisco, Garland, Grand Prairie, Mansfield, Plano, Red Oak, and Waxahachie. The districts that have the spring break the following week are Lancaster and Duncanville, as well as our Dallas County Community College district. So Cedar Valley actually has their spring break in the following week. However, the academic team is committed to ensuring that our early college students, that we have a plan in place to ensure that there is not a lag in their instruction. Trustees, last week you had a concern regarding the attendance on those half days, so we did present you with that data just to draw your attention to a specific area. We pulled the ADA, and just for those in the audience, that's our average daily attendance. We do an average daily attendance weight, which every campus in the district. We pulled the attendance on the first day of school, which, we hopefully yields the best attendance. The second day of school, because we recognize some students may not attend the first, they may attend the second. We did also pull the attendance rate for what the attendance looked like once students have been in school for a full week. So that's second Monday. And then, historical legend says that some students wait until after Labor Day to attend school. So we pulled that post-Labor Day data as well. The next column is the half day that we had our first parent conference that occurred this year in October. Then we pulled the data for our snapshot day. We pulled the data for our December early release as well as our February early release. And when the team reviewed this data, we did see a significant dip in attendance for that Christmas holiday break. District-wide, we saw our attendance fall down to 88%. We had one campus as low as 67.8%. And so that did yield some concern for the team. However, the two main days in question, that half day that occurred in October and that half day that we just had in February, we saw district-wide attendance was at 92.6 and 93. And just for point of reference, we pulled the attendance data for last Monday, February 25th, and district-wide we were at 94.7. So we did not see an extreme variance in attendance on a half day versus a standard day. Beyond that, trustees, I do want to draw your attention to the survey results that are yielded as a result of extending the window. I believe last week we presented, we had about 310 respondents. As of this evening, we had 653 respondents. We saw a great increase in the number of parents who responded to the survey. Option C still yielded the best overall response. And so, trustees, this evening we did want to present to you option C, but we do have a proposed modification that we want to recommend this evening instead. Based on the ADA data that we reviewed this past last week, we are proposing that we eliminate the December early release. If we look at this year's academic calendar, parents and those in attendance, we had 4 half days. We had a half day in Christmas. We had a half day in October, half day in February, and the last day of school this year is a half day, which brings us to a total of 4 half days. On the modified calendar that we would like to present to the trustees this evening, we are recommending that we reduce that by 50%. We only have the 2 half days, the one being October and in February, to account for an opportunity for those parent conferences, and then that next day off is for PD. We have reviewed, Trustee Hooper, I do recognize that you did ask for parent conference data as well as some of our other trustees. We were only able to pull the parent data from the most recent one in terms of me feeling confident that that's accurate data. 1,551 parent conferences occurred in February. Trustee Hooper, I recognize that you requested a historical look, but due to the transitions in campus and district leadership, I cannot say with certainty that that data has been maintained with fidelity. So I don't have a historical reference for you. What I do have is the 1551 from February, and we did receive the data from October. We haven't had a chance to research that yet, to look at that quite yet. Trustees, the PowerPoint was done in advance. However, you have a printed copy of the proposed modified calendar. So again, we're recommending option C with the modification that we remove the December early release day. That would bring our calendar to 77,400 minutes, which yields 172 student days, which equates to 174 ADA days. I know in my conferences with my colleagues, Ms. Cabrera was concerned we would lose a day of funding. We would not. We have 174 days of funding this school year, and the option we are proposing this evening also yields 174 days of funding.
Thank you, Board. Once again, this is listed as an action item, but we have a motion and a second, and we did subsequently approve it to open for discussion, and such will entertain questions or comments. Trustee Hooper.
Thank you for your presentation. So the point of my question, as was reflected in my comments, was to not only be able to get the data, but to see the time frames in which those conferences took place. Because the premise of my argument was how many parent conferences were taking place prior to, school being released. Whereas, traditionally, for those who are old like me, we have parent conference in the evening. Now we're requiring parents to have to take off work. And because if we look at this calendar, those students are not only going to be off for a half day on that Thursday, but then they'll be out of school that Friday as well as Monday. And so potentially you might be asking a parent to either try to secure childcare for at least 2 days and potentially have to take off for 3 days or at least 2.5 days in order to get that child. So that was my question was how effective are these parent conferences that are occurring at 1 o'clock or the half day versus after school as I'm used to in my educational experience.
So moving forward, we definitely anticipate modifying the way these parent conferences look. Our academic calendar does not stipulate the time frame in which these conferences can occur. Members of my team, we've been brainstorming, and we do foresee creating an option for parents that extends into the evening. That definitely means we've got to solve for staff, what that looks like, how do we accommodate our staff, but we understand that it's not quite feasible for a parent to be able to take off work and attend a 1 o'clock or a 2 o'clock conference. And so we're looking at ways to create an opportunity where parents can perhaps attend a 5 o'clock or a 6 o'clock conference. But that's something that's in development.
Well, for folk that are in the education world, such as myself, I kind of sucked it up to the game to know that at least one day each semester that I potentially was going to be at work to 8 o'clock. I mean, that was just what it was. That was the rule of the game. You knew that you were at least going to do a parent conference, that you were going to be at school from wherever early you got there in the morning to 8 o'clock at night in the fall as well as the spring. And, I just really want to know the effectiveness, and that's why I asked for that data. And again, this President's Day, these the only people, that's a new thing to me that people get off for President's Day in school. Like, I don't remember even getting off President's Day when I was growing up, and I graduated in 2001. So, and I definitely don't get off work. And I have a government job, but okay.
Thank you, Trustee Hooper. Board, once again, there was a motion and second to open for discussion. Questions?
Well, I
Trustee
do.
Fleming.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, you did. I'm sorry. I do want to say thank you for going back out and reposting the calendar so that we could get more people giving input, providing input. Okay, so on the 88 half day, you said for the day before Christmas. If you go back in your presentation, please. So the day before, so you said that there was no change? Or there was? Okay, so 88.23%. Is that what I'm looking at?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so there was a dip in that day, which is why you're proposing that the other option, C, modified, takes away the half day because students didn't come. So this is my question, and I know, can you go back one more about the presentation for the new people who voted for that, the actual results, the responses? I don't know which way. Okay. So we have 302 parents, the teachers, 215, staff administrators. Okay, so I have two concerns. The first concern is when I'm looking at this calendar, and I guess my question is, why can't there be a marrying of both worlds? I know traditionally it's been so that teachers come to school, they go through PD the whole first 2 weeks, and the last days they work in their classroom. However, as a parent, my issue is that when I come and you open up the doors for me to teacher night, you're not ready for me to teacher night. And so teachers are still scrambling, trying to get something ready, and the school looks disarray, and you're trying to post stuff on the walls at the last minute to tell me where to go. Why can't that be put on the front end where they have time to work in their classrooms, and then they can come back on the back end and finish things that weren't done? I mean, as I listened to teachers, they said that was not an option of the two that they could see. Of course, more people on the back end will probably look at the days off versus the days that they have to prepare. But again, the way you start is how you finish. So if we're not looking at preparation and you're saying they can be off on a Friday, which means they're not really off on a Friday, they're going to come to school and work in their classrooms on a Friday. But we're saying it is an off day for teachers per this calendar. And then they go in, they have staff development, professional development, campus development, every kind of development we can possibly imagine. And then say go work in your classrooms. And then they're going to work from 15, 16, 17, 18. So I know I can't talk about that because that's not what you're proposing. But at the same time, my question is, if you have control of creating a calendar, why can't you create the calendar that marries the best of both worlds? Maybe that's something else to look at, which is why we have this open for discussion. The second part of it is, if you're having the 20th and you're off on the 20th, I'm glad that you finally gave them, so they have a work day that they come back in somewhere else. Oh, the 20th. So we're taking the 20 off. So basically the teachers will work that entire week and then they're off. I guess my question was the day when we're talking about the hours, because we were concerned about the hours, option B and option A calendar had more hours embedded. Why can't you just give them that? That's what I'm saying. Where was the conflict as to having the day off before the holiday versus being here all day? Because where are we talking about? Because of enrollment?
Attendance?
So the question is again: is it because is it because we're stopping school at May 28th for the last day of school? And that's why I didn't have the other options in front of me. I apologize because I have 900 pages. But we're stopping school May 28th, so that day cuts off for the instructional days, but the instructional time that is embedded. So they would work the entire week and then get off. And then go right into the Christmas break and they will get paid, that's not to mention wherever the the payday calendar is. So that means they'll get paid on the 20th and then they have to rush out and they'll be at work all day and can't spend the money. So these are things I'm
confused. Are we talking about December? You said the last day of the 28th. So now, okay, we're talking about in December.
We're talking about paydays. We're talking about when people get off work. Again, that half a day allow people to still leave and go do any shopping that they had or whatever else was going on. You're layering it with pay structures. The pay structure wasn't added. Remember, you said it'll come at a later time, which is why I asked for the pay structure so you can see where it falls. Because all these things, it looks good on paper right now, but as the time goes on, it actually affects somebody in some capacity as we go into the days. So these are just things to think about. I'm just asking, why can't there just be a calendar? If you have three options, why can't there be a calendar that has the best of both worlds? And if so, we came up with option C, and option C has the less time out of all the other two calendars. Option A and option B.
We say less time. Are you meaning instructional time or teacher preparation
I'm saying
time?
instructional time because what people see is what you present. If you put less time on there, then it makes people think, oh, it's less, so I'm going to vote for the less, not saying it is the best option.
Well, one unique difference about option C, and I was trying to follow you. I don't know if it remedies your initial question and concern about the beginning of the school year and having those prep days on the front end. One thing that staff liked about option C is that they do have that Thursday and that Friday to themselves. In past, those days may have been PD days. And so when teachers are wanting to get into the classroom and get prepared for the next week, they're in PD. And so one feature of option C is that their PD is up front, and it gives them that Thursday, that Friday, and many of our committed staff members come in over the weekend, but it does give them the end of the week to really get prepped for the first day of school.
Okay, so that's fine. But I'm just saying, being mindful of when you're having a door open for a Meet the Teacher night, your building needs to be in order for people to come in and meet a teacher. So those are things, I mean, we really don't know. We only have so many people that actually responded. But again, I'm just going to go back to, there has to be a better way where people are responding, because in the past, and this has always been done, and we're given these different options, and in the past this has been turned over as well, where you don't have enough responses and you're still trying to figure out why you don't for something that affects so many people. If that's the case of the 20th, let me start over, go back to it. So on the 20th, they will work. I just wanted I wanted the payday calendar to overlap with this calendar, because again, there's still different things. Other than that, for the parents that responded to the survey, to the calendar option survey, then this is what we're dealing with. I'm going back to what Trustee Hooper said as to having that information. It's like, I'm only speaking on half of it, and so for most people, they're probably figuring out what are you talking about, but the things that we asked for was for a reason, so that when we make an informed decision, this is based off of all the information presented. Thank you.
So I'll tell you what I do appreciate. So I appreciate going back to the 6 weeks, because I was never a big supporter of the 9-week. But, and I guess I'm a traditionalist in some regard when it comes to education, because it just seems that every year, and the state is responsible for this too, we have taken more days away from school. Like, it used to be we were in school 180 days, and we've uniquely finessed that past the 175 on the opposite side of it. And we talk about being competitive with kids in other countries who go to school for longer days and longer periods of time. And we're continuously having conversation about how we are decreasing the amount of time that kids are in school. And I get it. I get the rest, breaks, and all of that. But I'm miserable when I'm not at work. So let me just, because I love what I do. But, because I'm one, I think kids need to be, we need to have some intentional focus toward preparing kids to be ready. And we keep having conversations about how we reduce the amount of days that kids are in the classroom and teachers are at work, and I get it, so I hear all of that, but I struggle with reducing the amount, this continual, and it's not just us, it's just the industry in itself. But we are, it used to be you were in school solid 180 days, period. And we just keep going back, and I see all the snickers and this, that, and that. But it's true. It's a problem. And I'm just saying, we already fight about not having enough time in the day to get it done and to prepare our kids and this, that, and the other. But we're steady cutting the amount of days the kids are actually in school. That's just a problem for me, in and of itself. But I get it. But I just have to say that I struggle with that, especially when I know that kids have opportunities to address their deficiencies so that we can prepare them for, the options that they want to pursue. And I just struggle with that. I mean, I appreciate you guys going back and at least doing most of what we asked to try to make a decision. So, I mean, at this point, I can make a decision, but, I don't know if I'm happy either way, but I know a decision has to be made. So, all right.
So, Trustee, to your point, we are required to have at least 75,600 minutes a day, and that yields 168 days of instruction. We're coming in at 174, so we're even exceeding that, and we understand. We share your concern, and we share the desire to have our students in school as much as possible. But Trustee, we also do build in time for PD too, and that's something that may have been different from when you and I were in school back in the day.
Thank you so much, and Dr. Weaver, once again, it's been echoed. Thank you for you guys going back and putting this back out to the community, to our teachers, to our faculty and staff, to get more responses. We as elected officials are charged with managing the will of the people, and it's always good when you have more people speaking to have the data that is right in front of us to be able to make an informed decision and one that represents the wishes of the people we serve. This was open up for questions and comments. I see Trustee Daniel, after which Trustee Sargent. Trustee Daniel.
All right. My question doesn't have anything to do with student days. I guess you'll be happy to know that. I remember when we were talking about becoming a district of innovation, the one comment I made to Dr. Harris was, I don't want teachers to have to start school at the beginning of October. And I see, and I don't know if you've even considered this, but I see that you have new teachers coming on, August, I don't mean October. October would be nice, but August. I see that you have new teachers coming on the 1st and 2nd of August, and then you have returning teachers coming on the 6th of August, and they have the 5th and the 9th as days off, except the 5th is really before school starts. Did anybody consider on the calendars moving new teachers to the 5th and 6th and returning teachers to the 7th, 8th, and 9th? Was that considered at all?
Yes, ma'am, that was a point of discussion, and one thing that the committees were trying to balance was the start of the year with the end of the year. We also heard a desire that parents would like for their students to be out by May and not to extend the school year into June. And so by doing that, it did back us up to the beginning of the year, but that was certainly a point of discussion for the committee members.
I don't see how that would change student days at all. School would still be over by the 28th of May.
But in doing so, we would lose one of those work days where you wanted to make the 9th, as of right now it's an off day, make that a PD day?
Make it a what?
A day where staff comes to work. Is that what you're,
right. And have the returning staff not come on the 6th, but have the new staff come on the 5th and 6th, the returning staff coming on the 7th, 8th, and 9th. Which they're coming 3 days anyway, the 6th, 7th, and 8th. Mm-hmm. If I were a teacher, I'd think that was a big plus. It's only 1 day difference for the returning teacher, but for the new teachers, it's a whole weekend. Mm-hmm. It's 1, 2, 3, 4 days difference. Anyhow, there's...
Thank you, Trustee Daniel. Trustee Sargent.
Okay. Pending vote. I just need an example. So what would the full day on the 20th look like for the middle school and the high school, being that they are final exam campuses for the semester? Because they'll be done with the semester that week, right?
No, the semester's not over.
The semester isn't over until September 17th? Okay, well then that adds to keeping it as a full day. I get it now.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was confused.
Thank you, Trustee Sargent. Board, once again, we do have a motion and a second to open for discussion. This is listed as an action item. And if there are no additional questions or comments, then we can definitely entertain a motion to take action for this item.
So this is our question, Ms. Cole Hamilton. The question that is lingering amongst the board is the semester ending in January instead of before break. And is there a way, or what can we do to end our semester prior to break so that the students don't have to try to remember all this material that was learned first semester and come back in January and, oh, here we go with final exams from December, and with the technology and the retention span, yeah, probably not likely they're going to be that successful.
What?
So that's 8 days that we will be removing from the semester. That would factor into our minutes. We could definitely do that. We would have to look at shortening Thanksgiving break to accommodate for those additional minutes of instruction. Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
For those additional minutes of instruction. But that's not an option that our calendar committee came up with. But if that is something the board would like for us to entertain, we could.
These are I'm sorry. These are new phenomenons in education. For those of us who are old, like me, at the ripe old age of 36, we only used to get 3 days for Thanksgiving. We only used to get 3 days of Thanksgiving. These are new phenomenons in education. Not only are we going to school less days, but we're getting longer breaks. Like, y'all know, y'all were in school, you know you got 3 days for Thanksgiving holiday. This week, well, some even under me saying 2. I remember 3. But the ending the school year, I mean, on a serious note, ending the semester in the same calendar year, so that December, it does assist with kids being successful with their exams and this, that, and the other. Now, I know you don't necessarily have to have the same exact number of days in each 6 weeks as evident in the varying numbers, but I think on the student side, I'm gonna take it back to students. I would think that they would perform better if they were assessed for the semester exam or this, that, and the other in the same semester in the same calendar year of which they're receiving that instruction, rather than waiting that 2-week period and then that 2-week break, and then they're getting exams the following week. So it's actually a 3-week period, because I'm sure they're not taking exams to that 13th through 17th time period, right? So that's 3 weeks. So they got 2 weeks off for vacation. Mm-hmm. Then they in school for 1 week. Right. Well, actually, they're in school for 3 days.
To review. Mm-hmm.
For 3 days of review. And then the following week, they're testing. So they've been chilling for 3 weeks, basically. And now you want them who have the shortest retention spans, and you want them to come back and be successful on their final exams 3 weeks later. I get it. I mean, again, I understand, why they probably voted for this calendar. But I'm going back to how are we going to affect student achievement. And that's the driving force behind where I am. And I get it. And you can't overwork teachers and all of that stuff. I get it. I'm with you, Ms. Daniels. I've been in the classroom. I hear it. But again, like from a practical standpoint, I'm going to forget stuff in 3 weeks that you want me to be assessed. And I know with some districts, but even, the point that I'm about to make is not even relevant to the fall semester, because I know some of this is probably done because some districts probably use the EOC also as their final exam data, but that's a district decision. But that wouldn't be relevant for the fall exams anyway. So why are those, and not for you to speak for the whole state of Texas and why this is the trend, but why do you think that the calendar committee decided upon a semester that would end that far into the new year?
I think, Trustee Hoover, I think that's a great question, and Dr. Weaver and I were kind of discussing amongst ourselves just now that there's so many good ideas that are coming forth this board, and we all know that none of us is as smart as all of us, but we're definitely appreciative of the work that the committee put in place to go through this and look at options for us, and Dr. Weaver has been extremely receptive to hearing, and as I'm sure administration has heard, the items of opportunity, areas of opportunity that we can use to get better with our calendar. But the question that Trustee Hooper asked specifically was, do we know why the committee arrived at this decision for the semester?
I don't know. We have some members here, but no, sir, I don't have the collective answer for the committee.
There's nothing seen or done that suggests that it should be any different.
Let me be clear why she comes. I'm not trying to get darts thrown at me by teachers, angry teachers trying to affect their holidays. I really have legit questions about student achievement. So forgive me, everybody, if they got darts about me touching your holidays.
No. They presented us with a wealth of information and calendars, and we looked at all of it, and we considered parents and grandparents, who all would be taking care of the children, and given all the scenarios, it seemed well. It seemed well. There was nothing to why it shouldn't be. Kids used to be given assignments during Christmas break. And I call myself an innovative mother, I create programs for my kids and their friends. I have scavenger hunts where you got to go find stuff that's relative to whatever your homework assignment is. And we have to look at the demographics of the type of students and parents that we have. I would have it driven by incentives. I would give them awards or something like that for being in touch with what's going on with school. If there was some other activity, I would make them a part of that. And that gives opportunities for parents to be creative with their children, also with travels. I know how it used to be. I'm 53. I graduated in 84. So I know what that's like too, but I drew back on what my parent exposed me to, my parents, and it made sense. It worked well. I was telling you to call me.
Right. Go present.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for that. It's great to have a committee member here present, and I think, Ms. Sanders, you articulating that speaks volumes of what has been the underlying theme for everything else as it relates to the comments during the paper report, which is it's a collective body. It's a group of individuals coming together and make the best decisions for our students and our community members at large. And so once again, thank you, Dr. Weaver and staff, for going out for additional days to get more feedback from the community. Board, we have a document that memorializes the sentiments of our community based on what they desire for our academic calendar to be. We know that Dr. Weaver is charged to making sure that instruction happens to its fullest extent each and every day our students are with us on campus, and having this document for proposal and action, I will ask the board if there's a motion and a second that we might take on this agenda item. There's no motion or second. Dr. Weaver, go ahead, sir.
Definitely want to appreciate all those people that went through a ton of time and effort to create calendar proposals for us. We faced an issue similar to this in Chicago, where our semesters did not end at the end of a calendar year. And one of the ways, as we investigated that issue, what we found is that we sometimes perpetuated this idea that learning is only needed to pass an end of course exam or end of a semester exam, and that we don't prepare children to retain information long enough so that they can be successful on advanced placement courses, SAT, ACT, those same exams, those same entrance things that we just spoke about not even an hour ago. Their ability to learn and retain information is not dependent on when they take their exams, when the semester ends, but the quality of their experience and the quality of the instruction and the quality of their learning experiences. Those are things that we can solve for. Those are things that are important. This calendar is a different way for us to organize learning over a 6-week basis with frequent interim assessments to let us know where kids are learning so we can be responsive. That is more important than when the semester ends. And so I do want to make the recommendation for this calendar. It is something that has gone through the process. It is something that we believe in. This is what we are recommending to this board based on the input from our parents, our teachers. This is the calendar that we are recommending.
Board, you've heard the recommendation of the superintendent. I'll entertain a motion and a second if there be any from the board at this time. Trustee Daniel.
I move to approve the potential modification to calendar C. I personally like the ending after Christmas.
We have a motion by Trustee Daniel. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Trustee Gold. Additional questions or comment?
So was this me? I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Trustee Fleming.
Was the potential modification sent out to the parents when he had to vote? Because if they were voting on this and they were looking at what they would have to do in the planning of?
No, ma'am. The potential modification came as a result of us looking at the feedback from the parent survey and taking into consideration concerns from trustees. Also, after we reviewed the ADA data from the year, collectively the administration is recommending the potential modification.
So this came out today?
Yes, ma'am.
Any additional questions, comments, discussion? Trustee Clark.
My only comment is in regards to Dr. Weaver just said that we want learning to continue and it's not at the end of the semester. When students did get packets though over this past break, parents complained about it. So we just need to be mindful and intentional that we tell the parents ahead of time to expect that students are now going to get work over these breaks, because it came up several times, my kid has work. And if we want to continue learning and make sure that learning is continuing over these breaks, then we just want our parents to know ahead of time. So I support that notion, and I didn't see a problem with the students having work over break, because we know that is how they stay learning, but just know it did come up as a concern.
Absolutely, Trustee Clark, thank you very much. And I do want to clarify, I do not support at all giving kids homework or work over the break. That is not a position that I take at all. We are going to value students holistically. And a holistic approach requires us to take into account cognitive breaks. What I am proposing is that we will have, over time, a very strong learning experience for students, where even when they take an academic break, they will not lose the knowledge that they've received. So thank you for bringing it up, because I do not want parents to know. I want to be very clear. It is important for children to have breaks and to decompress. That is a part of the learning process.
Thank you, Dr. Weaver. Board, we have a motion and a second to approve the recommendation of the superintendent on item 4A. I can now call the question. You may now cast your vote. All votes being tallied, that motion passes 6-1. Board, that brings us to item 4B. This is an action item, and as such, we'll entertain a motion and a second if there be any from the board at this time. This is an item that we discussed last meeting, and so administration went back, made the changes. I'll entertain a motion and a second from the board if there be any at this time.
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve by trustee Hooper. Is there a second? Is there a second? Seeing and hearing none, is there a counter motion?
Move to open to discussion.
We have a motion to open discussion. Is there a second?
A second.
Motion to open for discussion by trustee Clark. That motion was seconded by trustee Daniel. Dr. Weaver.
Thank you. I'm going to call Therese Johnson and Natalia Fernandez to the podium. Thank you.
Good evening, President Sherman, Dr. Weaver, and Board of Trustees. We are bringing forward the course catalog to discuss.
Hello, good evening again. Last week we talked about the process that led up to the course catalog. In addition to the process that was discussed last week, we added the curriculum department, CTE department, and counseling services. We completed final edits and reviews. We basically looked at the entire catalog. We looked over it visually and made sure that all of the edits and reviews were done. The new courses, these as well, were discussed last week. As a follow-up to one of the concerns about the curriculum, after further research, Region 10, along with local colleges and universities, they're the ones that create the curriculum for those two college preparatory courses. These are the course revisions, name changes, but nothing towards the TEKS or anything like that changes. The graduation requirement changes. Just wanted to point out again that health is no longer a requirement for our district. However, we included speech. We continue to keep speech in there, and that in turn added an extra half credit towards the elective. Students can take health as an elective along with other elective courses. Lastly, in reference to suggestions that were given by the board, we created in the high school course catalog a portion for understanding your credits. And what we did was we broke down a course example and how the credits fall for each semester, and then that would be the total credits. Our CTE courses, as was stated last week, many of those courses can go for more than 1 credit, up to about 3 credits. And so we included that, this visual, if you will, in the course catalog as well. In reference to the middle school update in the course catalog, there are only 3 high school courses in the middle school course catalog, so we did not include a visual of this nature, but we included in the course description that those courses will grant you a 1 credit for a 1 high school course credit. And then lastly, in reference to the civics course or interaction with peace officers, we did our further research, and it is for students who enter grade 9 for this particular school year. We are in the process of currently working to determine how we're going to have our students gain this knowledge. We did also find out that it has to be provided at least once before graduation. So while they are 9th graders, we just need to make sure we provide it before they walk across the stage. Any questions?
Thank you, board. There was a motion and a subsequent second to open for discussion. Are there any questions or comments? Trustee Daniel.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry. Trustee Clark.
Thank you for the updates to the course catalog. My question is, on the middle school level, we still have double block for reading, for English.
Yes.
And I know we didn't talk about it last time. Has that proven to be successful thus far with our improvement on the middle school level, or can we offer an additional elective for our students instead of double blocking that English class for the students who don't need it necessarily?
Who don't need it? That is a good question. I know last year when they were in the talks, and I can't speak to it fully because I'm not on the curriculum side, but that was a question. If they didn't need it, do they have to be double blocked? But that is going to be a question for our curriculum to answer. I will say from my understanding, they did have their STAR scores did show some gains. And so I don't know if that was from the double block or not, but that was something that we did discuss when they talked about going into that double blocking.
Trustee Daniel.
Okay, I have my thoughts together now. There are a lot of choices in the course catalog. What is going to happen if we decide in the need to save money next year that we're going to cut programs? What will happen in that case?
That's a very good question. When we developed the course choice sheets, we allowed the students to choose 4 alternatives. And so we explained to them when we're meeting with them that, you know what, these are your 8 choices, but you need to choose 4 alternatives because these classes may not make or something may happen and we can't offer it to you. And so in that case, we're going to go down the row of your alternate selections. And so that is how we approach in the event that programs are cut, we'll go to their alternates that students have chosen.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any additional questions or comments? Board? Seeing and hearing none, we did have a motion to open for discussion. We would need a motion and a second to consider this item under action.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion by Trustee Hooper to approve as presented. That motion was seconded by Trustee Clark. Any additional questions or comments? Seeing and hearing none, I'll call the question. You may now cast your vote. All votes being tallied, that motion passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Board, the next item listed is 4C. If there's no objection, Board, I would like to take 4D and come back to 4C. Is there any objection to that? Seeing and hearing none, Board, let's go on to item 4D, which is listed in the agenda. Dr. Weaver.
Thank you, President Sherman. I'll call in Deb Cabrera, our Interim Chief Financial Officer.
Good evening, President Sherman, board members, and Dr. Weaver. We're bringing this action item back to you. We postponed it for approval because there were some questions and concerns, and I'm willing to address those. And of course, as you can see, I've also attached some information regarding our outstanding debt and some information that will help you in looking at not only the bonded or the voted debt, what we call voted debt, but also what the refunding that we've already approved and we'll be going forward with that shortly looks like, and also what the maintenance tax notes would do with several options. So if you'd like, I tried to put it on a PowerPoint slide, but you basically, when we projected it on the screen, you cannot see anything. So I will try to direct you to each one and the page number. The first one that you asked about was the overall outstanding debt and then the impact on the refunding, because we have to push out one of the principal payments for August of 2019 for the debt service fund to ensure that we have enough funds available. That, I believe, is on your page 808. At least that's how it appeared when I pulled it up from the PDF that Ms. Rand sent me. And it's right behind the resolution, and it says combined debt requirement schedule. And basically, if you just look at the very last column, you can see that after the refunding in the 2019-20 school year, our debt payment will go down from the $14 million, which it currently is at, to about $8.6 million. And as I said a few minutes earlier, we'll have the ample funds in the debt service fund to actually make that payment and not have to worry about trying to, borrow funds. And then you can see after we apply the refunding and restructure the debt, the remaining payments, and actually we will have some increases going forward over the years until you get to, I guess, the biggest dip is probably in 2032-33 school year. there any questions on the outstanding debt? Okay, we can circle back also for questions at the end. So the very next schedule on page 809, this evening we're asking you to increase the amount not to exceed on the maintenance tax notes. Now this is the sale that will give about $14 million of proceeds to be deposited into the general operating fund so that we will not have a cash flow issue going forward. Once we receive the proceeds, we'll be able to pay back our outstanding 6 million TANs in May. And then also, hopefully, the goal is with all the budget cuts for next year, with the adoption of the 1920 budget, we should have ample funds not to have to do another tax anticipation note next year. This will cover all of those transactions, and with the advice of our financial advisors who are in the audience this evening waiting patiently in case you had any questions that I couldn't answer, we've come up with a scenario on this maintenance tax note. Now, also what you'll see on this schedule that I believe is on page 809 that says Maintenance Tax Note Series 2019. You asked about the Q-scabs and what we currently owe on that. So in the center of the columns, you can see the annual payment and the impact on the tax rate that it has for the $1.17 of the maintenance tax. And then if you look next to it, you'll see energy management, and that's what we call that E3 project, where we borrowed funds to do the energy initiative, the changing out of the LED light bulbs and HVAC units. And then that shows the annual payment for the remaining fiscal years ended in the first column going forward, and what that obligates off of the $1.17 for that repayment. And then we're looking at, and this is the suggested one, the proceeds of $14.4 million and paying it back. And a lot of discussions with the financial advisors and just my thought process of what it's going to look like to get to the $23 million cuts next year, and the fact that we have to structure the debt service now. We think that 3-level payments would be what we would recommend going forward, and it's not reflected on the schedule, but I will tell you the annual payments include the principal of the 14.4 plus interest earnings, and so that would cost the district about $1.8 million in interest to borrow $14 million for 3 years, but that's at a very conservative estimate of 4.25 interest. We've had our 2 visits with the rating agencies, S&P and Fitch, and we're very hopeful that we will not have another downgrade after the initial one, and so hopefully we'll be able to go out to the market in about a month and see some positive results, and hopefully be able to bring that down. And of course, we will share the final results with both the maintenance tax sale and the refunding of the debt of the outstanding debt. Page 810 just shows the other scenario. We were actually able to pay back the short-term piece of that amount of money, but to expect to pay $11 million in February 2020 is just a little bit too aggressive and a little bit scary in trying to, get there. And the difference in the interest over the 3 years, the first one, as I discussed, was $1.8 million in interest. This one would cost about $1.3 million in interest, so that $500,000, why substantial? I think it's just important to not put the district in another position to have to go out to the market again because we can't make that payment, that very aggressive payment. And then I do have a bit of good news on page 811. We thought about how we would do the refunding of the bonds, and as you know, we did a parameter order not to exceed a certain amount of refunding bonds, so we looked at some other opportunities with some of the other issues, and also not pushing out that payment, that $3.9 million, for 10 years and only pay interest. So in this regards, if you look at the second column from the end, it says Series 2019 refunding. You can see where we would refund the bonds, add the new bonds, and originally Our original plan was to refund less, but pay more. In interest, it was $1.8 million. This option here that we like much better, obviously, it would only cost us $1.2 million in interest. And I don't mean to say only in a regards that that's not substantial, but it will straighten out our debt service for future years. Interestingly enough, that was one of the questions that Fitch asked this morning when Dr. Weaver and I were on a rating agency call with them, and they wanted to know specifically when would the debt service fund have a significant fund balance to be self-supporting so that we wouldn't have to do anything like we're doing now with this refunding issue. And then the very last column, I know you're very curious about the impact. The first column you can see for the taxable assessed value, we're assuming no growth, being very, very, very conservative. And in that regard, you can see the first 2 years, obviously last year and this year, we were at the 32 cents. And having to do the refunding and going forward, you can see the third row, looking at a 44-cent tax rate on the INS side for next year, and then going up to 46 for several years, and then dropping back down to the 44. And it wouldn't be until the 2032 year that we would dip down to 34 cents.
Mr. Cabrera, if you could, for clarification, the page numbers may perhaps be off. And so I've heard one number of 811, I've heard another number of 808 as far as page number. Which page can we refer to see the specific maintenance notes for Series 2019 projected tax rate, which is that second column from the right? And then which page number are you referring to?
Mine showed 811 when I looked it up.
This is not 811.
18.
Yeah, so when I pulled it up on a PDF, yeah, it says refunds, the 18.
Yeah.
I'm sorry about that. I don't know why when I pull it up on the PDF, the number shows differently than what's actually on it's like off a page. But you can tell the one that I'm talking about now, the very last column shows projected INS tax rate. And it starts with 32 cents and it goes all the way down to 13 pennies when you get to 2040. This would be the structure in the debt for the debt service fund on the INS side. It's not the maintenance tax notes. That was the 2 pages prior to that. And I'd be more than happy to go back over those. It's a lot of debt in a lot of areas. We have debt on the general operating side, which would be our QSCABs, our energy initiative, and then we'll soon to have the maintenance tax notes. And of course, we'll have the outstanding TANs paid off for next school year. That's $6 million. And then when we go to the debt service side, we're refunding some bonds to make the August 2019 payment out of the debt service fund and have the resources available to do that. And then the other issue that came up last time that caused us to kind of table this was in regards to our investment account with TCG, and in reviewing the investment portfolio, the quarterly investment report, and there were some concern that there might be some funds that weren't reported on the investment report that might be available for the district. And I have a response from TCG. I spoke with John Pesci this afternoon. He is the chief executive officer for TCG and one of the co-founders. And he made sure that somebody at the office would be able to look up and address my concerns. We invested $21 million with TCG. That was from the bond proceeds, and all of those proceeds over a period of several months matured from the investments that they invested in. They currently hold no money from the district whatsoever, and all of those funds were returned and accounted for. And I have a copy of the email that they sent me in that regards. If you'd like a copy, I'd be more than happy to let you see the analysis that we went through, so you'll feel comfortable that there's no funds outstanding that they owe us. And of course, I'll entertain any questions in regard to the resolution, the parameter order, the outstanding debt schedules, the maintenance tax notes, the refunding, and any concerns in regarding to the TCG group that prepares our quarterly investment report, and at one time had some of our money invested.
Thank you, Ms. Cabrera. Board, this is an action item. We did consider it, have discussion on last meeting. I know the Finance Committee has kind of dug into it as well. This is an action item, and as such, I'll entertain a motion and second if there be any from the board at this time.
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve by Trustee Fleming. That motion was seconded by Trustee Gold. Any questions, comments? Trustee Fleming.
Ms. Cabrera, thank you for going back. I apologize. I wanted to stop you way before so that I
Sorry.
could follow you throughout through the presentation. So forgive me if you saw me doing my timeout. Again, I can't ask questions that I don't know where you are, and everything that you say, I want to make sure that I'm following it to a T. For the scenario ones and the scenario twos. So basically, can you go back over that again? Because I didn't even see. I was looking at page 807. I do believe that what it was. But actually, can you go back to 807, which was your first one with the existing voted bond debt and the 2019 refunded bonds? Is that one of them?
Yeah, so that should be the very first schedule.
Okay.
After the resolution, all the full order resolution that you're going to have to approve. So the very first schedule should say DeSoto Independent School District, Dallas County, Texas, combined debt requirement schedule. And this is the debt service fund, the INS portion of the tax rate. These are all our outstanding voted bonds.
Okay.
And then the impact of the refunding that we're doing to push out the principal payment that's due in August of 2019, for which we do not have the funds.
So
And of course, it's projected because we haven't sold the bonds yet.
because we don't have the 1.8. So that's what I was looking for from there. But once we get on schedule, so we're looking all the way out to 2040. 2040 is now putting us at a projected of, so am I looking under the 2019 refunding bonds, the interest that we're paying out? Well, actually, is that interest in two places? That interest is combined from the existing voting bond debt to the 2019 refunded bonds? Or will the refunded bonds pay the existing voted bond debt?
Okay, the refunding bonds projected, the principal repay of the 4.4. Is that what you're referring to?
So under you have the due date for February 15, 2019. So that's the payment that you're saying that right now we're unable to make, correct?
No, we've already made the February 15th payment this month. I guess it's March already, last month. It would be the 8/15/2019. But as you can see, because of the refunding bonds, we're dropping that total amount due to $8.5 million. If we didn't have the refunding, in there, then our requirement would have been around $14 million. So what we're refunding will allow us to make the debt payment that's due August of 2019. And it's kind of confusing because the August 2019 payment is actually in the 1920 school year.
Okay.
But because we have a June 30th year end, the 32-cent rate that we currently have and the taxes that are been collected December, January, is what's sitting in the bank to make that payment.
So the interest due on all our refunded bonds, is this the amount that's at the very bottom? That's the interest that would have been paid?
Correct.
And so the end of 2040, we would have been completely out of debt of the bonds that we have thus far on this page by paying the amount to the right, the $291,000.
Well, the very last payment on 8/15/2040 would be $4,695,000, and then we would have no debt.
Okay, so that's from 2040. Then going back, okay, so 2040. Then you gave us the other schedule, scenario 1, scenario 2.
Okay, so that's the maintenance tax notes, and that's part of this evening's resolution that we need to sell $14.4 million, or we need to sell no greater than 14.690. I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice again. The proceeds, the par amount, and the parameter order that you're approving this evening is for $14,690,000. That will generate $14,400,000 in proceeds. And then to pay those back, scenario 1 is almost 3 level payments of a little bit more than $5 million, whereas the next scenario is making a huge payment back, almost as if we had borrowed another TANs. The recommendation was to combine a future TANs, which is more dealing with a cash flow issue, not having all of our state funds come in when we need to make our most of our payments. And obviously the majority of that would be the payroll. So scenario 2 was a little bit aggressive, and we just felt uncomfortable at this time to put the district in a financial strait, so where they would have to make sure that they have $11.5 million a year from now.
$11.5 million when?
Oh, thank you.
Instead of having it a year from now. Okay, so the other one, so basically scenario 1 is the one that you're proposing to go with.
Sorry, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then our tax rate now going to, that will be passed to, okay, it's too many pages, 810. So page 810, the one that you showed us. So our M&O tax rate.
This is the INS tax rate.
INS tax,
yeah.
I'm sorry. INS tax rate would increase to this plus the 117.
Correct. So the M&O portion, the general operating fund, Fund 199, $1.17, stays at $1.17, and then the INS tax rate will go up to 44 cents. Now, once we get a good fund balance built back up in the general operating fund, you'll have the option of doing a transfer of the money that you collected on the general fund side, the maintenance and tax side, part of that 117, over to the debt service and manage your tax rate. This would be the worst case scenario if you did not transfer any funds from the general operating fund based on this restructuring. Your tax rate would have to go to this, assuming your taxable assessed value is flat. Of course, we're hoping that the taxable assessed value will go up. This is kind of like worst case scenario, the most conservative we can think of, just to kind of give you an example of what it possibly could be, assuming no growth whatsoever going forward. And then, of course, you would have to make that decision once we build up the fund balance on the operating side, if you want to do a combination of a little bit of a tax rate and a little bit of a transfer, or transfer the whole $3 million, which basically is what the gap is that you're trying to fill in by having a lower tax rate.
Okay, and then to page 811, then we're looking at, this is what the homeowners receive based
Yes.
off of the projected amount of looking at where their tax rate would actually be.
Yeah, it's just an example of if you have a $100,000, home, what it would look like after the $25,000 residential homestead state mandated exemption, and how it would change, and when you can see it going back down again. And again, worst case scenario, considering no taxable value growth in the district.
No taxable. This is
value growth.
This is
Yeah, just flat.
Okay.
Very conservative, the impact. Assuming that you choose to not transfer anything from the operating fund, which really for the next 2 years is not an option on the table.
Okay, that makes sense. I just need to.
Yeah, it's a lot of numbers and a lot of data, and coming from different sources. So I understand.
Right, but thank you for that, because we did ask for what we were paying for QZAB. We asked for everything, and you did exactly that. And so I really appreciate this. This is very good. I just want to hear the conversation out loud, because we see so many numbers. You have to make sure we're still saying the same thing. Also, when we're doing so now we're talking about the taxes, now we're talking about not our tax anticipation, what we're about to vote on today.
Maintenance tax notes.
Yes, maintenance tax notes. I'm learning so much. We talked about when they actually close out. So one of the things that we asked in the finance committee meeting was what was their charge, and the breakdown of the closing costs of what we were looking at as far as what was all going to be paid from there. So will that still be decided upon once it goes out, or did that change as well? Or did we get numbers?
No, that would be the difference between let's see. Of course, I think my pages are one more than yours. So if you go to probably your page 808, and that was the first scenario with the 3-level payments. And Leon, correct me if I'm wrong, with the difference between the proceeds and the par amount account for being able to subsidize the closing costs and all the fees out of the difference between those two.
Close enough, ma'am. As you know, we would not do anything that simple. Right. But that is the gist of it.
Leon, if you don't mind, please step to a lectern, and that way we have this memorialized for our constituents and community members who are interested.
Thank you, ma'am. Leon Johnson, George K. Baum and Company. Ladies and gentlemen, your CFO has done a masterful job of presenting a tremendous amount of very complicated data, hopefully where I would not claim anyone's going to be an expert, but at least one can make an informed decision, and that is the goal at all time. The parameters that we have from the lawyers are in the order that you have. Those were developed by using parameters that were also developed then by working with the business office, with the administration, looking at what is our goal, because, we can sell anything, but does it solve the problem? That's the question. The goal then was, one, look at the two parts, because let us remember, we are solving two problems. We are solving a problem on the INS, or called debt side. We're solving that by refunding some 2019 maturities, dropping a payment to meet our resources, and interestingly enough, and this is what Ms. Cabrera was able to report to the rating agencies, we will in fact have our debt service back on track before the end of this fiscal year. So, wonderful, solve that. Now, that's wonderful for the bondholders. Let's talk about the part that we may be a little more interested in at this board, which is maintenance and operations, because this is what operates the school. This is our light bill. This is our transportation. This is our teachers. So this is very important money. So the question wasn't, can we get money? The lawyers said yes, and they said this is how to do it, use a maintenance tax note. Then the discussion shifted to, how should we size that note? And our recommendation and consideration by the administration was, we want to do two things. We want to minimize cost to the extent possible, but we are even more importantly concerned with making sure that it works. We cannot have anything that doesn't solve the problem in a timely manner and in a method that we have explained to two rating services and everybody is looking at, but more importantly, we cannot have anything that would leave us with someone coming back to a board and saying, oops, we're short. So, developing with those parameters, we went back, talked with the lawyers. They went into Austin, talked with the Attorney General's office, went through everything. We lined up all the parts and pieces. And at the end of the day, what we came back with was, one, the rating agencies, the bondholders, everybody that looks at us, doesn't really care how much you borrow to solve your problem, but they really care how many times you borrow it. So what we said was, if there is the possibility, and there clearly was, that's been on the table all along, the possibility of having to come back for a tax anticipation note very quickly, basically kind of within the calendar year or shortly thereafter, we needed to give ourselves, one, our best chance at keeping our rating and improving our rating, the minimum number of borrowings. We've already had one. We had a 10. We're going to do 2 more. One solves INS, one solves M&O. All right, when we put those together, rating agency says, great. If it works and we think you've got a good shot, we like it. We see how you're going to get out of this. Go to the well one time. Now, that also does another thing that we're very interested in. Every time we sell bonds, there are a lot of people that you probably don't get to meet, but they all have their hand out. And there's a lot of cost in doing a bond sale. If we can do one maintenance tax related sale, it's a whole lot cheaper in cost of issuance than doing 2. So we actually save money. Now, how do you want to pay it back? Well, any good CFO, and you have a good CFO, is going to always look at how much interest are we paying. Well, how can you save interest? Well, pay it back quick. Well, we need 3 years to pay it back. Well, within that, can you adjust it? Yes, you can. You could pay back a lot immediately, save interest. So let's look at that. It's a great program. It's logical. It's an option. But it's not a recommended option for the simple reason that when we ran the numbers, we put ourselves at risk, is what Ms. Cabrera just said. We are at risk that if anything bobbled, we might have missed our dollars and need some more money by putting that big payment and saving a little interest. Make it 3 payments, know we've got it, and if we don't spend some of that money, never seen a school district that could say that they didn't spend the money. I haven't run into that, so we never have enough. But if there's money left on this, yes, you'll be paying interest on it, but it can go right back into a reserve fund or a, quote, INS fund and be used to pay the bonds down so that you don't have to take it from M&O. Now, one of the other things that is very important about this option, you have $1.17 for M&O, total tax rate. That's it. You can't go any further. When we issue maintenance tax notes, when you issued the QZABs, when you issued the energy management notes, the payment for those, as you saw on the sheet, comes out of your $1.17. So what's our other goal? Let's maximize how much goes back for the lights, the transportation, and most importantly, for the teachers. We have a huge differential on how we have money available. What am I remembering? About $6 million, something like that. If we do it in 3 payments next year, we've got $6 million more dollars in our M&O. That's our M&O for expenses, not bondholders' M&O. So that was the third consideration.
And issuance cost.
Oh yeah, an issuance cost on that.
How much?
I can pull the whole thing. I can get it for you. Dan, how much? 300. There's the number.
1,000.
Yeah, we do tend to use a lot of zeros. I'm sorry. But at the end of the day, you're trying to balance a lot of objectives. But the goal is, number one, let's get it back on track. Let's get it there as fast as possible. Let's be sure that we have conservatively looked at it so that there is no reasonable expectation that it will be missed. And there's Ms. Cabrera's statement again. This is a worst case scenario. There is 0 growth projected. If we get the growth that looks reasonable and what the reports say from the people that do this, we will have more value next year than what we're showing. If we do, the board will do what it does every year. You will get your total values, you will work up a budget, and then you will figure out a tax rate to fund that budget. So it's entirely possible that on the M&O side, we might not have to use as much of our $1.17 for debt as we're showing now, which would put what? More into the M&O for the kids. And on the debt side, the INS side, if we get more value, it doesn't take as much tax rate. But let's show everybody what the worst case is. Dan and I have just never gotten into any trouble when things came in better than we promised, and we're really not interested in finding out what happens when they don't. So this is how this was developed, and if there's other questions on it, be so pleased to try to answer it.
Thank you, Board. We do have a motion and a second to approve as presented. We do have an opportunity to ask questions, should we have any at this time. Trustee Clark.
Thank you for the breakdown and presentation to both of you guys. We do appreciate that.
So a part of this is conservative, and obviously the media does not, they're not necessarily always into the details, but what's been presented to us and what's posted online is that if you have a $100,000 home in DeSoto based on no growth, your anticipated tax increase would be roughly $93, and obviously you multiply that based on the value of your home. So that's one thing. One point that we should all be concerned with is just the mechanism in which public schools are funded, because as property values increase in communities, the state takes that money back from us on the back end with what they contribute to fund public schools. And so that's why everyone should take note and be interested in what the House presents. The Education Committee will present their version of a bill down at the Texas Legislature tomorrow. I understand they're trying to put a significant amount of money into funding public schools in a way that does not discount us based on our property value fluctuations, and to not be caught up in the hype of the Senate bill, which right now calls for a $5,000 increase to teachers. And while we want that, we want to make sure that we take care of teachers and we're extremely competitive. That version of the bill only has a grant for those funds, and those funds expire, after which times districts will have to figure out how to fund the raise that's been pushed to us through this grant. But then also, independent of figuring out how to fund it on a continuous basis, we still have to solve for the public school financing situation that we find ourselves in now and making sure the state adequately funds us. So for community members, please stay tuned to that tomorrow. We have conservative numbers of where we will be pending board action tonight, but we definitely want to make sure that we have some solution coming out of our state house and out of this legislative session that will be tangible and real for our community as well. Any questions or comments, board? Seeing and hearing none, we have a motion to approve as presented. That motion was made by Trustee Fleming. There was a second from Trustee Gold. Having no additional questions, I will call the question, and you may now cast your vote. All votes being tallied, that motion passes 7-0. Boards, you'll recall we moved, we skipped to item 4D, and so now we'll move back up to 4C, which is listed in the agenda. This is an action item. I know that we will have some discussion, and board, rather than take a formal vote, is it okay if we open the floor for discussion for this item? Seeing and hearing no objection to that, Dr. Weaver. Sure. Sure. Board, if there's no objection to this as well, we can take a quick bio break, come back, everyone, be fully engaged and ready to dive into the data that will be presented to us. Seeing and hearing none, the time is now 8:49 p.m., and we will take a brief recess. All right, the time is now 8:59 p.m., and we will resume our meeting from a brief recess. We are now once again at item 4C as listed in the agenda. We took a I gave an opportunity for people to raise an objection if they did not want to go ahead and open up for discussion. This is an action item. There was no objection to opening for discussion. And so with that, I will yield the floor to Dr. Weaver at this time.
Thank you, President Sherman. I'll call up Sajid Miller, Chief of Schools.
Good evening, Mr. Sherman, Dr. Weaver, members of the board. Last board meeting, we did a future board item for the district and campus improvement plans by which we outlined provided an overview and outlined the general format of the respective plans. And I think you guys have had opportunity to review those and even the revised versions. And so now I'll entertain any questions that you may have about the process or contents found within the documents.
Board, this is an action item. Once again, it was on the agenda last week for future consideration. I definitely had an opportunity to ask questions. I know that administration has fielded some, but we definitely want to open the floor now if there are any questions or comments as relates to this item. If there are no questions or comments, Trustee Fleming.
So one of our main goals as a board is to ensure that student academic achievement is met or exceeded.
Yes, ma'am.
And so looking at, and I can only start with our district plan because I have so many questions, I really, really do. But let me start with our district improvement plan. We were saying that for our domain 1, that the student achievement results reflect an overall 5% increase at the meets and above level as measured by TA accountability system by June 2019. And so as we look at, some people say, well, why 5? So my first question is, why 5%? Start there, and I'll go.
So this is a goal that we went back and forth on. We knew that we definitely want to have a goal that really articulated our desire to really focus on the meets or above level and not necessarily have a goal that's traditionally been focused on the approaches level. So since we did have certain areas such as third grade math where there was regression from year to year performance, we had some areas where there was improvement. We set the baseline as this year we want a minimum of 5% gains at meets or above in every tested area as a starting point. Keeping in mind that there are 3 months remaining in this academic year between now and the end of the school year, and really looking at a realistic measure of performance, but also articulated our desire to really perform beyond the approaches level.
Okay. So as we look at this, and you said that our descriptions are, we're going to implement a TEKS-aligned viable curriculum. Well, we, by law, have to follow that. And then you have PBMAS, but PBMAS does not actually cater to all of our student populations, does it, or does it not?
No, ma'am, it does not. So the reason that was particularly addressed is because that's what we were, why our district was an improvement required. It's based off of the students who were monitored in PBMAS. So not only do those strategies for increasing teacher capacity specifically support in that particular area, but it also has a ripple effect throughout the entire organization. So that was a way to infuse what we're doing for that particular target group of students and also have an impact on the organization as a whole.
Okay. So we're looking at the part 2 of that is basically we want to, again, to create those critical thinking skills, being able to communicate, whether I guess it's using technology, in our next performance objective 2. We want to increase our overall achievement. Okay, so in layman's terms, 5% equates to what growth based off the numbers of our students who are taking tests?
So it depends on the particular tested area to determine what 5% equates to, but what it does say is that we want 5 percentage points more than what previously performed at the college readiness indicator. So I would have to look at every test.
In each of the...
Yes, ma'am. At every single area. Yes, ma'am. Every grade level, every tested area.
So is that possible to get that information? Because again, in order to measure evaluate our superintendent, and you're saying this is our district improvement plan at this point, of course he has his own goals. But these are things that we're doing collaboratively as a district. There should be some progress measure points to say where are we, so when you bring data back, we should be looking at these populations to see if there's growth happening.
Yes, ma'am. So what I heard you say is I'll identify specific targets based off of each tested area in reference to where they were last year and what 5% would equate to.
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
Because what our community needs to know is that in our transition, that yes, we do not want that D. I mean, just sitting with that. However, when you really look at our population of students that we're looking at, we need to be looking at growth. And we need to look at if instruction is happening. So I know people are going to be stuck on this D, but we need to be looking at what are we turning and what are the outputs. If we're setting the goals, are we achieving them?
Yes, ma'am.
The second question is, as I look through, since this is overall, as I look through every campus improvement plan, commended to the job well done. To our principals, to our staff, the members of the CIP planning committees, and of course our district improvement planning committee. Thank you for your work. Thank you for the effort that we do see in our plans. However, there's just inconsistency saying if this is our district goal, some of the places in so many campuses fell flat as to if this is the expectation, why is that not shadow? Because some of the plans show that they were expecting 70% approaches. We don't live in a land of approaches. That should be nowhere in a campus improvement plan when we start talking about student achievement.
Yes, ma'am. So we've heard that loudly and clearly, and I will say that that's one thing that we've noticed, the central team. And so this Thursday, first of all, I want to start by giving kudos to echo your sentiment to the principals who are still with us today to make sure that we publicly acknowledge their hard work and dedication. And this has been an iterative process, and they've had to re-engage their stakeholders and engage in quarterly or monthly meetings about the campus improvement plans. But in addition to that, this Thursday we'll be having one-on-one conferences to make the strategic adjustments to ensure that we're in alignment with the district improvement plan. Typically, as you know, this process really begins now for next year, beginning with a fully thought out comprehensive comprehensive needs assessment that we don't wait for the state assessment data to get here. Right. We started now based off of what we know because it's too critical for our students for us to be waiting until the last minute. So typically we'll start that process. We're actually meeting Dr. Weaver's challenge with being an ambidextrous organization for improvement. So we're working on the right now, but we're also casting and going to reach the mark for the future. So yes, Trustee Fleming, there is a disconnect with regard to a focus on meets and post-secondary readiness and preparedness. And so during our meetings this Thursday from 8 to 3, the principals and their leadership teams will engage in conversations with all central staff focused on alignment to the district goals and the campus goals, and not only alignment to what's on paper, right? Mm-hmm. But alignment to what's really happening, and then holding me accountable. Accountability is a two-way street. Right. Holding me accountable for providing the support and infrastructure, and me holding them accountable for clearly articulating goals that are aligned to the district goals. So thank you for that observation.
It is, isn't it? Thank you for that, Mr. Miller. And last but not least, and again, because I know where we are, and I know for understanding that this is temporary, this is our attempt to say we are focused on doing what's best for our children. So how are our observations, because I know we have an evaluation system, so how are the observations being turned back in? Because we spend a lot of time in our campus improvement plan about professional development, but it's hard to measure professional development without having the observation of professional development and looking at that perform in the classroom. So where are we as looking at that, even if that was some of the meat that goes back into our campus improvement plan as of how observations correlate to teacher capacity? So
a big thing that's echoed throughout all of the strategies is really a focus on valuing our teachers and building their capacity, but also addressing some of the concerns that are brought forth. So one of the challenges is, yes, through their T-test annual appraisal system, it should clearly articulate a professional development plan. So in subsequent conversations, really having conversations about where are our teachers, how can we best support them, and what type of professional development do we offer. In addition to that, every principal here does have a T-test appraisal schedule, and so one of their action items for this week is to have all of those fully scheduled, and we're moving towards completion of those, but they have been in classrooms on a reoccurring basis, and it's an iterative process. Just the other day, me and one of the elementary principals, we sort of tag team. So we go into a classroom. And I'm, where I'm going based off the data. I want to go to third grade math, right? So the first thing, hey, Mr. Miller, how you doing? We talk about what's going on. And she looks, and I said, let's go to third grade math right now. So we go to third grade math, and not to beat or to anybody down, but to your point, we go, and I step out. I say, hey, what do you see? And she talks about what she sees. I say, hey, this is what I saw. And so what are your next steps? And then how can we support that teacher who's giving it her all but needs our support? And then we have a plan. And before we leave that day, we have a game plan. And then she was so excited. She called me that morning. I said, what are you doing? I'm in so-and-so's class. We're doing observations. We're having a coaching session. So to your point, yes, we're shifting the focus from, totalitarianism and this is what we're going to do and putting things on paper to a job embedded cycle of coaching and feedback to where we really can get the biggest bang for our buck, and not to demean or put down our teachers, because we have phenomenal teachers and we have phenomenal leaders, but to provide a structure and a system of support that's facilitated through ongoing feedback and coaching.
So to echo that, because I echo that everything 100%. Is there any way to, if we're saying, okay, this is what we're looking at and this is what's happening, that some of those progress measure points are actually based off of improving in the areas of, let me be clear, to many of the principals, you were very crystal clear about your problems and the root causes. And I thank y'all for transparency, because that's the only way we can go through and see that, oh, this is what they need. So there are conversations that we will still have that will be filtered back to Dr. Weaver and his team that says, no, these are real issues that they're having. If you're talking about we're at a learning at Amber Terrace and teachers are not fully understanding what early childhood involves, that's a huge problem. And if the teachers were willing to put that on paper to say these are our deficiencies, how dare we not address those and answer those calls, because they're saying we need the help here. And so that was echoed through many of your statements, and we saw that. So if there could be progress measures, because we would like to be, just to know about the observations that are happening. Yes, we know they have to happen, but looking at how is that transforming the data as well, because that's the other part of the story, that our leaders should have that, just have that spotlight to say, they are coaching their teachers, and teachers are coaching teachers, and and instructional coaches and APs as well. So last but not least, if we're looking at because I'm going to keep this short. So you said you will go back and look at some of those things as far as the CIP. That was just one observation. And then, how are we? Okay, so if we know by the end, I'm sorry, let me go back to the district plan. This is what I was looking at. I have little tags, y'all, but I'm for the sake of time, I'm going to send it out. Oh, so when we looked at our formative assessments, so some people had 75%, some people had 5%, but a lot of it was professional development. And we keep talking about professional development. And I know teachers are probably like, we are PD'd out. Don't give us any more if we can't get the feedback to supply, to support that. In our plan, we looked at teacher retention. I hope this is the right one.
6%.
What page? Okay, right. So goal 2, which is to retain, develop, and attract quality teachers. Let me say to Dr. Weaver, thank you, because some of these goals are what we talked about and said, what are our folk as a board. So he did echo things that we talked about that were priorities as a board that did come back, and I'm glad that the committee that got together saw that some of these areas had to be addressed as well. When we look at the teacher retention.
Yes, ma'am.
On 4, because it says identify critical need areas as approved by the Board of Trustees. When we're talking about a strategy, I don't know if that's a strategy per se, because some of again, we set those priorities and then you fulfill those. I don't know if you need more specificity from us as the board that goes there, but just to have that in place kind of lends itself to, okay, you're saying what's critical, then you're going to wait till us to come back and tell you what's critical. So I did see that. And then I also asked, again, going back to the TPST, is there a we talked about the observation calendar of who was going to evaluate who, Dr. Weaver, or if you know as well, the evaluation of who was evaluating who, because usually there's the timeline that comes out. I
Yes,
don't
ma'am.
think
Yes, ma'am.
we receive that as far as timelines and where we are and what, just that whole process.
As far as the teaching staff or the entire organization?
I mean, organization would be well too to know who's, who's evaluating who,
Yeah,
but
okay.
at the same time, there's guidelines, timelines, and everything else in the evaluation system.
Yes, ma'am. I'll make a note and get that back to you guys.
And the last one was the finance. And so some of those, again, I guess as far as the targets, that was just my question as to how do the targets move? Who is in charge of the formative to say, we're here, we're there? Is that a campus decision, principal decision, your decision? How does that work again?
So we're going to look at the context. It's based off of the needs, the derived needs that, based off the problem statements that you see that are clearly articulated, and we'll move. And this is a living document. So the targets, while we want to make sure we're clear about the goals and the performance objectives, the actually quarterly review, they will adjust based off of the needs at that time at each individual campus and at the district level as well.
Okay, and then last but not least, some principals put in where it was a TEA priority, and some did not
Yes, ma'am.
address that. So,
That'll be part of the feedback from Thursday.
and so just to echo and I'm just going to get off that horse, but when we look at the performance objectives, when we're talking about student achievement, I'm not saying there has to be a standard of measurement across the board if everyone adopted 5. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying looking at realistic goals. Some of the schools said they wanted 30% meets and masters. I just really want us to take a look at what that approach was, and maybe at the time, accountability in every district is hard to grasp of moving out of that approaches, because approaches just means the kids passed, but we didn't pass.
Yes, ma'am.
And so, that's just the concept of when we see that echoed out throughout the plans, that just has to be critical as to what we're saying when a parent looks at the plan for student achievement going throughout the year. And that's all I have up front. But again, thank you, principals. Thank you, Mr. Miller, for the work that you've done, your committees, your teams, to getting us to this point that it's more thorough than I've seen in the past. So I thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Fleming. Trustee Hooper.
So I'm assuming that we can address either campus improvement as well as district improvement plans in this forum. So first, I want to thank my colleague Trustee Fleming for providing such a robust insight with the district improvement plan. I'm gonna go ahead and jump to the high school. So first, before I jump to the high school, I want to thank the principals for all of your diligence and your committees in terms of putting these plans together. So going to the high school specifically, I want to first thank Mr. Joseph and his team for their acknowledgement of some of the concerns and issues that need to be addressed in terms of us being successful in meeting our goals and objectives for our students. So you talked about, so you acknowledged the discipline concerns and address strategies and solutions for dealing with that. You also talked about classroom management concerns and issues. I am extremely interested. I know you talked about mentor teachers and as well as providing additional monitoring for those who are having classroom management issues. What I do know is that usually classroom management issues derive from lack of engagement, high quality engagement consistently in the classroom. Usually when kids are 100% and actively engaged, it eliminates the amount of issues that you have. I would also venture to say that for whatever reason, we have some staff, not a whole lot, but we have some that aren't as strong in their content. And some teachers that struggle in their content or that do not properly plan for highly engaging lessons and quality lessons every day. Oftentimes that might create disciplinary problems. Now, obviously, for those of us that have been in the game, we also know that that's not the only thing that causes disciplinary issues. So I'm very aware of that, and I appreciate the acknowledgement. But I just want to make sure that we properly support our teachers and give them, and I know Dr. Weaver has made a commitment to do that. But I know we talked about staffing ratios, and let me first be the one to say I get it. I am a little anxious to find out what support looks like, understanding that we do have a significant amount of teachers that struggle with their content, that struggle with disciplinary issues and concerns. And it goes back to properly preparing kids, for once they leave us. And I just have to overemphasize, what it's being intentional about what it is going to look like in terms of, assigning mentors, being very vigilant in terms of, working with teachers. I appreciate, Mr. Miller, what you said about, just changing the entire culture of the way even us big, bad administrators in terms of how we grow and work with teachers. That totalitarian approach does not work. And it further creates that separation between administrators and teachers. But even just the example that you just described, where that teacher doesn't feel threatened by understanding she got issues. But the fact that she received the feedback and actually was happy to get that level of support, and let's both work together in how we can come up with a plan. And I know, and I'm not picking on the high school, but I know that's a little bit even harder received in the secondary crafts, because most secondary folk, we believe that we are masters of our content, and we get real territorial. Even myself as a social studies expert, about somebody who might be an administrator who is very well great with instruction, but may not necessarily be an English teacher by profession or whatever. But I just want us to be very intentional about that. And, understand that there are also some cultural things that we have to change in terms of like expectations and this, that, and the other. I'm also very intentional about these other preparations that we provide for kids, like SAT, ACT. And I see your plan in here. I'm interested to see, what that is going to look like and feel like every day. Because again, we're a little ways off the mark. I would also like to look at some collaborations with our feeders, our middle schools, in terms of how do we create a comprehensive plan of preparedness for when kids transition from middle school to high school. And there's some experts in that, like, Ms. Lowe is there. I mean, she's been around for a while and she can give some pointers. But I think especially addressing some of those secondary challenges that we have, a more comprehensive plan of working together and collaboratively might address some of the deficiencies that we have. That's just my read, just based on looking at the secondary plans and thoughts. But I also understand that the CIPs are a living document, and it is modified and it changes based on needs as well as new issues and new data points that might come as we work this plan. So I get it, but thank you again for your work, and Mr. Miller, I appreciate your presentation.
Thank you, Trustee Hooper. Any additional comments, questions? Trustee Gold.
Yes, thank you so much for this. I guess I just want to make a couple of observations.
Yes, ma'am.
As reading the campus improvement plans for most everybody, did not read every word, I have to admit, of everybody's, but I did notice a common theme among most of them, and this is a point with less staff and less maybe support staff next year. The items that most people addressed that I think we really need to zero in how we can improve these areas is enlisting community volunteers. And there was a lot said about that on the different plans. But I know that they listed two or three different churches in this. But I think that most of the churches would get behind this if there was a concerted effort to enlist them, I guess. And so I know my church wasn't listed, but I know that we would help. So I guess I'm just saying that community volunteers could be huge next year. And so anything that I can do to help enlist the churches, I'll be glad to do that. I know the other board members would also, to enlist their specific churches. Anyway, that would be. Another thing that I've preached about for the 3 years I've been on here on the board is mentors for the teachers. And I know that that's going to cost money to enlist retired teachers, retired administrators to mentor teachers, but getting the bang for our buck, if we have to pay them, one time we were paying them $200 a semester to mentor teachers, that is nothing considering the knowledge and expertise that they can bring, especially to a teacher from 0 years to 5 years. They need help in that classroom. They need strategies, they need support, and I just think that is key, and that is something, to my knowledge, we used to do very, very well under the leadership of Kitty Hickerson, and that has not been done well in the last couple of years. So I'm really encouraging you. And that was in some of their CIPs, was to get back to providing mentors to their teachers. Even some teachers who've been in the classroom 10 years could use some help.
Yes, ma'am.
So we really need to get in that. I'm very strong on that. And the other thing is families, parents, grandmas, aunts and uncles. We need these kids to see their support staff being involved in their education. If they could, and I don't know how we're going to improve that, it needs to be improved. I've got a couple of ideas. I'm sure everybody's got ideas, but we really need to brainstorm how we're going to get these families involved. Because if they can see their parents caring, then maybe they will care a little bit more. So those are, and there's a ton of other things, but I'm just going to zero in on those were my key ones.
Yes,
mentors, parents, community people, anybody and everybody out there that can support these wonderful, wonderful leaders that we have in this school, but they need help. And I think that would be one area we could help.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Trustee Gold. Trustee Clark.
I just want to say thank you, Mr. Miller, for your work on getting the CIPs and the district improvement plan. In the 2 years I've sat on the board, this is the first time I've seen a thorough CIP and district improvement plan. So thank you so much for your hard work. And to the principals, thank you all for the work you do daily.
Thank you, Trustee Clark. Are there any additional questions or comments? Trustee Fleming.
Let me ask this, with the, what was I going to say? Oh, we talked about the attendance rate. We talked about those things still have to be addressed. And I know a lot of plans did not. Some of the elementary schools did hit on it, some of the middle schools. But like I said, collectively, when you start looking at the numbers, and we were looking at our enrollment numbers for the daily rate. Some of those things are still not addressed. And I want to say shout out to Wings for addressing it, because that is the elephant in the room. It has to be there. If we're not talking about dropout with them, then again, we go back with the IR. So again, know that, I'm sorry, I did take the time to go through all this. I did, and I will, like I said, send that to you and Dr. Weaver, just for that, just the thoughts, because there's still some more, clarifying questions, but for the sake of it, just those are things that have to be addressed, because if we're missing that, then again, our students' needs aren't being met. And I'm looking at that even in our Hispanic populations at the high school, our American Indian populations at the high school. And I know they're not a very big population, so how 40% of them part of the dropout rate? Are we addressing that? And so those are little things that when we go back and we measure at the end of the year, when people say, oh, well, you didn't get your rating, let us show you the areas that we actually start focusing on. And these are our areas of growth. So we can tell that story again, because we understand where we are at this time. So again, thank you for your presentation. Leaders, you have your work cut out for you, but thank you for hanging in there. Go back and champion your teachers who champion our kids, and thank you for your work.
Trustee Fleming, you're spot on. We should read through this entire document. We had it last week for that very purpose, because when we are out articulating the vision of this district and where we are, but where we plan to go, and we need to have a full understanding of what our campuses, what our administrators are saying the goals are, and how we will attain those things. So thank you for taking the time to read through it all. It's extremely important. And Dr. Weaver, thank you for the additional time and concerted effort put into this. I was very Trustee Fleming kind of started out her questions as far as where is the consistency between the campus improvement plan, the district improvement plan. That was definitely one of the things that I listed. So I am sure, like most board members or all of us, appreciative of the fact that you guys will have another conversation on Thursday to make sure that there's some alignment between the expectation of the district, but also the expectations on those individual campuses. And then, as board members, our job is to basically look through this, vet it in a sense. The vetting is our community. Will they support this? Will they be behind this? Is this a plan that they can see real tangible results at the end of us implementing it? And then how do we support each other as a team of 8 from moving from where we are to where we want to be? And so one thing that I did notice was the level of parental engagement and community engagement on some of the campuses as opposed to others. And just food for thought. I know there's a law of diminishing returns, right? I'm not saying invite the whole campus out and have a campus PTA meeting for this process, right? But there should be some level of involvement from parents, because those are the people that are going to buy in first, because they've been at the table, they've been a part of that process. They're also the people whose kids play on each other's teams. They go to each other's churches, right? And you leverage those circles of influence, and everyone get around the true plan, not just what they think or what they've heard, but what they know, because the person that sits right next door to them or lives next door to them was a part of the process. And they can actually speak from their child's vantage point and not just one perspective of a teacher or administrator or someone of that stature. And so, and lastly, I do want to echo the sense that we want to make sure, or my view as a board member, right, to make sure that our kids are receiving some culturally inclusive instruction that is relevant to them, so that, as everyone has mentioned before, students want to come to school, they want to be engaged, because the things they read about, the things they learn about have an example or cases that relate to their everyday lives, and they can see themselves in the curriculum being taught. And then, I'm sorry, I think I said lastly, but I got one more lastly. And that is one of the things that we heard in previous years was streamlining the process to make sure that resources are made available to the principals. I'll say specifically, for example, with the Title I funds, and in some cases not having the ability to draw those down, or where the case may be, to fit those needs as they come up and they arrive. So if you guys can be intentional about making sure that there's that two-way communication, as you guys have articulated, that this plan, one, continues to live on, but two, principals and campus teams have the ability to be responsive to the needs as they pop up. So that's something that, once again, we've heard in the past, and so you guys might want to look intentionally into that aspect. Board, any further questions or comments? This is an action item, and as such, we will entertain a motion in a second if there be any from the board at this time.
Move to approve as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Trustee Clark. That motion was seconded by Trustee Fleming. Once again, that motion was to approve the plan as presented. Any additional questions or comments? Seeing and hearing none, I'll call the question. You may now cast your vote. All votes being tallied, that motion passes 7-0. Board, that brings us to our future action items under 5A. As listed in the agenda, future approval of EGT Institute Award. Dr. Weaver.
Thank you, President Sherman. Call Natalia Fernandez and Andre Ryan to the podium.
Perfect. There it is. Today we have a future action item for approval that will come next week or on March 25th for $110,000 towards EGT evaluation services for our newest Gear Up grant, the Next Generation Gear Up. So today I'm going to give you all a brief overview over where we are with our newest grant. On March 25th, we will have a communication item that will give you an update over the original Let's Gear Up grant, as well as some additional details around progress over the Next Generation Gear Up grant. But I do want to begin there we go. All right, so I do want to begin by just giving you all a couple of logistical informations about the grant. So first, the life of the grant is between 2018, so this year, and it will last up until 2025. The annual performance report date, which is unique to this grant, is April 15th. So that means our very first report date for the Department of Education will happen here very shortly in about a month and a half. The grant fiscal year is from October 1st through September 30th. So that puts us in the unique opportunity to be able to report on our performance. However, we'll still carry funds over up until September 30th. So to give you progress, the steering committee came together. The steering committee is made up of Mr. Ryan, the project director from the first Let's Gear Up grant, myself, Mr. Miller, Ms. Celeste Barreto, and Dr. Weaver. So we came together last week. We set some year one goals, keeping in mind the logic model that we had. We updated and posted grant positions, and we also reviewed the current partners that the grant includes. On the screen, you'll see reflected the 5 goals that we have. Again, just knowing that our current cohort of students are 6th and 7th grade. This means that the goals that you see reflected are those that are included in the logic model that might be currently lagging indicators that we've brought down to be able to have measurable metrics for our students this year. So the first goal is to increase the number of students earning meets and exceeds in Math Star by 10%, increase the number of students earning meets and exceeds in ELA Star exam by 10%. The Gear Up students will have a student connectedness indicator that is 5 points higher than the national average as indicated by our Panorama survey. We'll reduce exclusionary discipline by 5% and will increase parental engagement by 10% every year as measured by the Gear Up parent survey, as well as participation in Gear Up community events. So I think the natural question is, if the grant annual reporting is in a couple of weeks, about 6 weeks away, how will we be measuring? Setting goals that can be measured for our students and their performance currently will allow us to leverage our funds to make sure that we are aligning them to be able to not just meet the spirit of the grant, but make sure that we have accurate metrics. So every year the goals would shift as long as they're aligned with our logic model and ensuring that they're allowing our students to be on the path to meet the original goals that are included in the grant. However, we would see goals similar to this effect that both align with our district's overall district improvement plan, as well as the direction that we're headed in collectively as a district, but will ensure that we're able to meet the goals that we address in our original Gear Up grant narrative. So to give you an overview of today, you have a handout that does include a copy of the EGT contract. I do want to state that if you look at the date of the contract, it is for a 7-year term. We're currently working right now with EGT to make this a yearly contract, therefore requiring us to come to the board. We should see something reflected in the March 25th board meeting, but I did just want to go ahead and point that out. We're going to cover some logistics over the contract and our partnership with EGT, but I've invited Mr. Ryan here since he has the most expertise, sir.
So good evening. I believe that you all have a copy of the contract, the proposed contract. EGT has spelled out the scope of the work that they would provide for us. As I shared with Ms. Fernandez, EGT wrote all 9 Gear Up grants awarded in Texas this year, and EGT is the external evaluator for all 9 grants, not only DeSoto ISD, the Region 12 Service Center in Waco, which currently has 2 or 3 Gear Up grants in progress, the University of Texas at Austin, Austin ISD, the Region 1 Service Center in the Valley. So as I shared with Ms. Fernandez this afternoon, in the 33 years that I've worked in public education, 20 plus as a central staff member, EGT is by far one of the most talented firms that I have worked with. And there is a document I don't have with me. I believe EGT has garnered DeSoto ISD close to $70 million in grants. They would like to continue this partnership with us, and so I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have around the scope of the work that EGT might provide.
Thank you, Board. This is a future action item, and so we definitely want to engage in any questions that might lead us to an action item at the next meeting. Trustee Hooper.
So let me first say I don't have any problem with Trevino or EGT. I mean, I'm very familiar with his work, but I do have a question in terms of, so I understood you to say that this grant runs through from 18 to 2025. Have we expended any expenditures? Have we expended any funds currently under this new grant?
According to the drawdown report, we have not, but I think that's because the computer purchases have not been associated with the new grant. It's a small amount, maybe $5,000 at most.
So so if you could remind me, one, what is the total award, and then what is the annual drawdown that we would get?
Sure. The 7-year award amount is approximately $8.2 million, and that comes out to $1,178,400 a year.
Yeah, and currently I don't think. Well, you answered my question in terms of what is already associated with the grant. And so I'm not sure if 1 point, whatever you just said, million will be expended in this current year. What consequence, if any, will there be in terms of not using those funds in this first year?
So we do have until September 30th to use the funds. I think one of the things that hindered some of the progress towards spending the funds is just, one, ensuring that we had posted and hired the most appropriate personnel that's going to populate, just the longevity of the grant and how that grant really flourishes in our district. So one consideration that, was a little bit delayed, but that required the steering committee to come together to really be thoughtful about that process. I think we have hopefully a little bit of grace, just knowing that we do have until September 30th, and so we can carry over or create a plan for expending funds. But definitely, I think the concern that you have raised is, one that all of us have on our minds, and making sure that, we're operating quickly, yet with some strategic decisions to make sure that we don't compromise any funding in the future.
Thank you, Trustee Hooper. Trustee Fleming.
You said the annual was 8.2 million? 8.2 million
That's over the 7-year period.
over the 7 year, and then you divided that out by 7, right?
Correct.
And of that, then we would have to pay EGT the $770,000.
That is correct. Over the 7-year period.
Okay. You said you were going back in to reevaluate to see if you could do it on a yearly basis. Why would you recommend that? Just curious.
So we just want to change the scope of the contract to a yearly service, just to ensure that every year it's coming to the board, that we're providing progress, as just a gap that we saw in the previous grant, and just making sure that as we move forward, not only are we always ensuring that we're aligned to, the direction of the overall district, but that we're keeping everybody informed over the progress.
Oh, that's to be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Fleming. Trustee Sargent.
Yes, thank you. I understand that this is associated with the evaluation of data. So what is the data protocol for inputting that now? Like, how would that look from a district standpoint to be evaluated by this external evaluator?
Absolutely. There's several data collection points. The first one are the Gear Up site coordinators. Just for your notice, about 10 to 15% of their work is actually inputting data. Data would be services provided to students. Data would be services provided to teachers as well as parents. And so that's a significant portion of the data input. The second part comes from Teams extracts. So their database administrator works with Buddy Watson, and so there's always an exchange of data, so that as we are reporting to the government, that we can tie services provided to students according to the information that we provide in Teams.
So when you mentioned that the site coordinators are putting in data, what activities are they completing to get the data?
That could be a service that they have delivered to the students via a class. That could be tutoring data delivered by the teacher at the campus. That could be professional development data on a PD day, just anything and everything that happens that impacts the students in the 6th and 7th grades. That's information that the Department of Ed wants.
Okay. So that since that's going over a span of 3 campuses, is the Gear Up or the next generation Gear Up, are they also included in the campus improvement plans?
We'll make sure we get that information for you. At the moment, I don't think we have that, but we'll let you know.
For future reference.
Yep.
And then also, so you said that there's a transference of data between this external evaluator, EGT, and Teams via Buddy Watson.
Correct.
So how can that be extracted to again be put against goals set by campus improvement plans per each middle school? What will that look like, considering this is $700,000?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Do you have?
I'm not sure if I understand the question, so can you rephrase it?
So since we're paying $700,000 or have already paid it in the previous grant, and we have access to this data via Teams, via our caveat or conduit Buddy Watson, how are we pulling that across the lines of looking at the TAPER report we just received, putting it across campus improvement plans to bring about some type of cohesive effort to improve our student outcomes and achievements?
Okay. I'll take a stab at the question. There are 2 conversations that are occurring. One is reporting data so that the Department of Ed can determine that we have made adequate progress so that we continue funding. Mm-hmm. And then there's a local conversation. How do the activities align with the goals of the district? And so EGT's primary responsibility will be to help us to formulate the reports that are necessary for the Department of Ed so that we continue funding.
Okay. I guess I'm just trying to understand, since you mentioned that 20% of the site coordinator's position was to crunch data, and
No,
then we're
to enter.
To
10 to
enter
20% on any given week.
Okay. I was just trying to understand the proposed budget to agree for 7 years straight of something that happens every year, right? The yearly evaluation that somebody else is doing and then doing. Okay. Also, in the previous slides that you mentioned about goals, will those goals also be realigned, or is that pending the appointment of the program director, project director?
Yeah, so the steering committee should remain the same. As we grow out the grant, we'll include more members, including our principals who were not included in the original steering committee, parents, and other constituents. And so that's one aspect of the core central team that will continue to inform the goals. But yes, we would expect that the goals, as students continue to progress, for these goals to look different. And just really depending on the context. I think a lot of the points that you brought up earlier as far as how are our different data sets across the district informing and overlapping into the Gear Up, I do think is an important thing to take into consideration. I'm not very familiar with how EGT services works, but I do know that Mr. Ryan and I have had conversations just about the importance of making sure that whoever the evaluator is, understanding where we are as a district, where we're going, and also, of course, making sure that, we're holding ourselves accountable to making sure that we meet the spirit of the grant and meet those goals. But of course, always looking at what does the holistic experience for our students look like who are participating in this grant, and then, of course, those who are not, separate from that.
For sure. So when you speak of the evaluator, are there other options for evaluators? I know that Trevino wrote the grant and successfully executed them to get the funding, but are there other opportunities for evaluating of the grant that might be cheaper?
He's written into the grant right now, considering, where we are right now and just the history of Mr. Trevino and, the rapport of EGT services with Gear Up. We feel like this is the best recommendation for where we are right now.
Okay. I just know that funding is something that we're looking at and trying to maximize all grant funding, in whatever capacity we should need it, of course, to affect student outcomes. So I was just wondering if there was someone else or, other options we had.
Absolutely.
Within context. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Sargent. Trustee Fleming.
You said the year, it begins what year? Like the new year starts?
The fiscal year?
The fiscal year for?
October 1st.
October 1st. So I guess my only question would be, so at the end of the year, do you present to the board every year about the progress measures, are you attaining the goals? And I'm just trying to go back, is that when Mr. Trevino was here this past summer when they were going over that? Because if it ends October, or is there a board report that, do we give board, presentations as it relates to where we are in our grants and the performance measurement objectives that are being met as far as it relates to the alignment of the grant and district goals?
I can share with you that I know that Eddie was here earlier in the year because we ended we ended the I-3 grant, and so there's a final performance report that's due for that. Totally different time period, performance period, fiscal period. Even this Gear Up grant has a different fiscal year than the first Gear Up grant. So my guess, he was probably wrapping up I-3.
Okay. So I guess I'm just asking going forward, is there, any way to see where we are in relations to what our grants are doing as far as progress measurements being on point as to kind of what Trustee Sargent was alluding to? There should be more conversation around the presentation of what they're doing and, how we highlight our schools, highlight our grants as well. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Fleming. So Dr. Weaver, you guys have some data points for conversation for our next meeting when we have this item on it. Board, please, if you think of anything else as it relates to this future item, please reach out to Dr. Weaver and make him apprised of those things. I think overall the sentiment is we are not satisfied with how the first Gear Up grant was implemented and carried out to fidelity. We, to this point, I don't want to put words in anyone else's mouth, but are extremely disappointed with the performance, and there should be some oversight and some checkpoints along the way that we don't look back and say, well, what happened? Where are things at? Why didn't we get the results that we expected? So just I think everybody was kind of hemming and hawing around it. I just wanted to say it more direct. We were not satisfied at all, and still are not, with the performance of this grant, and something's got to change. Any additional questions or comments? Trustee Hooper.
Since you did that, that's not the independent evaluator. Those are the people that run the grant that are on staff, period.
Right. I think that Dr. Weaver, you as superintendent know that we as board members speak sometimes individually, but our larger sense is as a collective body, we want to make sure that when we articulate and have conversations with our parents, when we look at our students and the promise that they have, the bright futures that they have, that when they invest their time into a program and we invest our time and capacity from a fiscal standpoint, that we see some results that will lead them closer to their greatest ambitions and dreams. And since we are following those students from middle school through high school, we want to make sure that we can hold our hand over our chest and say, you know what, Dr. Weaver told us that this is how we're going to measure success. This is how we're going to hold people accountable physically as well as just from an implementation standpoint. And you know what, everything checked the box. And we got regular updates on a regular basis, independent of who's in the position, but just making sure that happens for kids in our district. Any additional questions or comments, board? Seeing and hearing none, board, we have no additional items. We have no need for executive session on tonight. And having no additional items for consideration at tonight's meeting, the time is now 9:55 p.m. and we'll adjourn this meeting.